The story revolves around Niro, a slave boy, in a world whose peace was once threatened by the Shadow Lord Secneum. Join Niro and his mission to change a world where slaves are not treated as humans. The story starts by introducing us to a couple. They're on their way back after collecting logs in the woods when they stumble upon an area littered with rotting corpses. They didn't give much of a reaction, indicating that these kinds of scenes were common in their world. As they continue to go their way, the cries of a baby come out of nowhere. As the two turn back, they find a baby in the arms of a dead elf. His father probably left to get milk. At first, they held back their urges to help the child, but as the cries continued, the woman couldn't help but save the child. It was then revealed that the couple are slaves, which explains why they were hesitant to save the baby. They didn't want to bring a baby into their hellish world. Fast forward to 5 years later, we're met with a child once again, who the couple has named Niro, the main protagonist of the story. We also find the mother, who is now pregnant. Since Niro is now 6 years old, the father takes him to a hatch hidden by a piece of cloth. The hatch leads to a hidden tunnel built by the father's ancestors. The tunnel is filled with books, and the father explains that this place was made by their ancestors to prepare their descendants. The father then instructs Niro to keep that place a secret and use it to silently prepare for when the world inevitably changes. That's a death flag, if I ever saw one. True enough, the father dies on the next panel. On his grave, we see Niro, his mother, and two little girls, Niro's siblings. So several years must have passed since the father revealed the tunnel. While he grieves in the father's grave, an unfamiliar man appears, who's then revealed to have killed Niro's father by putting poison in his medicine. The man plotted the death of Niro's father because he regretted not being able to buy the mother at the auction house in the past. This man is a mega simp. Knowing this, the mother was furious. But since the man is a commoner and has a higher social status as slaves, the mother cannot do anything but curse him. As the man is leaving, he foreshadows the possibility that the woman would be sold off as she's no longer useful. A few days later, the mother did end up getting sold by the master to his husband's killer. She cannot do anything but comply, leaving Niro alone with his two siblings. Poor Niro got orphaned twice now. Shortly after, Niro and his siblings find his mother lying dead in the street. Ah, the hair of death wins again. Niro can't do anything but cover his siblings' eyes. In the background, the killer is being arrested by two guards. Niro, with his newfound determination, decides to make the change his father once sought and protect his remaining family. Dang, the author really did the MC dirty. Niro continues to train in hopes of becoming strong enough to protect his family, as Niro and his two siblings, Wendy and Sylvie, prepare to sleep. The twin girls express their concerns about going to different masters. So, Niro explains to them his goal to turn himself and his siblings into commoners by graduating in the academy, Excanum, where the current emperor, who was once a slave, graduated from. So the emperor basically had a zero to hero story. 1 year later, the emperor visits the town where Niro resides to attend a meeting. He was met with the nobles managing the region, the Regus family, and was introduced to the young master, Ivan, who, like Niro, plans to attend the Excanum Academy when he grows up. The emperor and Evan take a leisurely walk to his treehouse and engage in a conversation, in which Ivan expresses his desire to become a magician like his father and showcases his talent to manipulate magic at a young age. Suddenly, a herd of bulls starts stampeding in their direction. The guards tried to stop them but failed. Ivan, on the other hand, was able to stop one bull with his magic. Damn, even a kid was better than the guards. As the emperor prepares to unsheath his sword, Niro appears and stops the bulls with his power to commune, a power unique to elves. Little bro has that bull riz. All but one bull stops, which Niro promptly finishes off by grabbing a sword nearby and stabbing it. The emperor asks Niro if he used magic or communed with the bulls, to which Niro denies, as he explains it was because he was the one who fed the bulls, and animals are hesitant to attack those who feed them. When asked for a reward, Niro expresses his desire to attend Excanum, shocking everyone, including Evan. However, it turns out Niro communed with the animals to attack the emperor, and his heroic act was part of a malicious plan to receive a reward from the emperor. The emperor saw through this, so he punished Niro by sending him to the mines to labor for the rest of his life. Who would have thought tricking the emperor was a bad idea? That night, Niro, a bunch of other slaves, and escorts are on their way to the mines. During the trip, some slaves talk about their destination, a magic ore mine. One of the slaves explains that magic ore is known to be addictive to monsters, so monster attacks are common in mines which pose a risk to miners. So basically, monsters just want to get high. Relatable. At home, we find Wendy and Sylvie, who are worrying about their future now that they're alone. As Wendy reassures Sylvie, Two people enter the house, the elder master and a noble with blonde hair. The blonde noble wants to buy the twins for 300 gold. However, the master is reluctant to sell the two due to the nasty rumors about the buyer. But the noble continues to increase the price he's willing to pay. When the price reaches 600 gold, the elder master's expression changes. This dude needs Jesus very badly. In the next panel, we find Niro screaming due to his frustration, but he was promptly whipped as punishment by one of the escorts. Suddenly, a rabid wolf attacks and kills a slave. Thankfully, the escorts fended it off and they continued the journey. Once the slaves arrived at the mines, they were immediately ordered to work. One miner attempted to get out of mining and get into the administrative force as he was originally a commoner, but he was beheaded by the warden instantly. That man should have kept his head down. Sometime later, we see Niro mining inside when a monster suddenly appears, overpowering the warden and killing a guard. As the monster was about to kill the warden, Niro swoops in and kills the monster. In the next scene, we're informed that the master didn't sell off the twins to the blonde noble despite his persistence, and in the mines, Niro was promoted as a guard due to his skill with the sword. Finally, some good news. The MC has been taking a lot of L's. The warden explains that Niro is just a temporary guard, but since he's now on guard duty, the warden assigns an elite Dark Knight to teach Niro how to use a sword. They notice that Niro is improving quickly and realize that Niro is probably a natural-born genius, so it's unfortunate he's a slave. During the training, we see a goblin behind the hills, most likely planning an attack. Niro is about to go back to mining with a smile on his face when he stumbles upon other slaves who are upset that he was in a better state than them. Ah yes, it's been a while since we've seen annoying side characters. After this clash, an elderly slave talks to Niro, who calls out how ungrateful the other slaves were, but it was natural, as it was human nature to hate people who are doing better than them. Moments later, the sound of a horn is heard, signaling combat. As Niro comes out of the mine, he sees the warden on his knees in front of a massive monster leading the goblins. Man's got a neck longer than one piece. The warden states that they already called for reinforcements, but just then, he was beheaded by the giant monster. The elite Dark Knight, the teacher of Niro, appears and kills a couple of goblins, but he was promptly killed by the giant monster as well. Should have hired the goblin slayer instead. Scared, Niro goes back to the mines where all the slaves are on their knees, ready to submit to the monster as their new master. Unfortunately, the monsters wanted nothing but meat, so they moved forward to kill the slaves. But Niro protected them by killing the goblins. Outside, a portal appears, killing a monster with fire magic. Back inside the mines, we see Niro at the tip of the giant monster's sword, on the verge of death despite his success killing the goblins. As the monster was about to kill and eat Niro, the Emperor appears, killing the monster with fire coming out of his sword. As his last words, Niro wanted the Emperor to bestow his deed to his sisters, but the Emperor refused to do so as he heals Nero's wounds. 3 slaves step forward, stating that Niro was useless, and they were the ones who protected the mine. Seeing through their lies, the Emperor burned them to crisp with his fire magic. Keep in mind, lying to the Emperor will always go badly. At that moment, he declares that Niro will attend Excanum as a reward for his heroic act of protecting the mines and his people. Niro is with Wendy and Sylvie once again, bidding an emotional farewell as he must attend Excanum. At that moment, he is called by the driver as they were about to leave. Niro is about to ride in the back of the cart where the luggage is stored when a knight appears, demanding that Niro be treated with utmost care, much to the annoyance of Evan, who was inside the cart. Niro chose to ride in the luggage cart anyway, like how he originally intended to, most probably to avoid clashing with the entitled nobles inside the cart. The knight yields, but he warns the driver that if Niro arrives in the academy with a sickly disease, punishment will be in store. During the trip, Niro holds his sword and reminisces about the moment when he had just made a full recovery. The Emperor gave him the sword of Nero's warden, Gigas, and it was at this time Niro was able to hold the sword without consequence as a slave. Once they arrived in Excanum, Niro and the Regas family, which included Ivan and his escort, were welcomed by the guards. It was then revealed that Niro is to be an adoptive son of the Regas family, as declared by the Emperor, much to the shock of Evan. My boy is really good at getting adopted. As they enter the academy, Ivan orders Niro not to associate himself with him and to act like Niro is not part of the Regas family. I had high hopes for you, little Evan. At the hall, we find every new student gathered, and at the next floor is the headmistress of the academy, Kadia Maraguez, welcoming the students. She specifically mentions the descendants of the heroes who aided Emperor Muren during the last war, the descendants from families of the great sages, Kundin and Atramis. the three royal families of the Elven Queen, Lundale, and the family of the Black Knight, Gayan. Nice. World-building time. Niro was silently ostracized by nearby students as he was a slave, unlike most of the students in the hall. After the welcoming ceremony, they were taken to a field, in which they were informed by a bald instructor that they must pass an entrance exam next month in order to become official students of the academy. Otherwise, they will be sent home. The exam will require 5 students, so they must form groups of 5. And this group can be composed of different genders. Oh, it's not 3 this time. That's surprising. Male students were hopeful to get in the same group as the 3 elves from the royal family, but as elves have great hearing, they were slapped by one of the elf princesses as a result. That's some female lead vibes. It is at this moment Niro admired the princess. Definitely the female lead. Once the groups are decided, it's revealed that Niro and Even are in the same group, along with a female slave and 2 male nobles. Of course, the 2 rivals are in the same group. Who would have thought? As soon as the group enters their room, Evan orders Niro and the female slave to take a bath as he doesn't want the room to stink. He also instructs Niro to call him master. Outside, the female slave tries to talk with Niro, but he simply advises her to stay low-key to avoid trouble. While in the bathhouse, Niro contemplates why the Emperor allowed him to live, and comes to the conclusion that he must have intended for Niro to prove himself in the academy. I really hope that's the case and the Emperor isn't just a jerk. When Niro gets back to the room, Avon orders him to do their laundry, to which he agrees. When the female slave comes to help, Niro explains that she shouldn't meddle with his chores. At night, one of the 2 nobles demanded the female slave to dance, but as she cannot do so, she sang instead. Shortly after, they went to sleep. Poor kids versus entitled kids. And the following morning, Niro brings breakfast for Even, but Even demands he bring the breakfast of the 2 nobles in their group as well. Niro hurriedly goes back to the cafeteria, along with the female slave. On their way back to their room, the female slave bumped into Niro, causing him to drop the bowl containing the food. As a result, the 2 slaves had to give away their breakfast instead. As they were cleaning up the mess, Niro scolds the female slave, but at this moment, he's reminded of what the elderly slave talked about in the mines. Don't be a jerk, Niro. The next day, the students gathered in a field and were instructed to choose an opponent for a match. The fat noble chose Niro, thinking he was weak, and the other noble in their group chose the female slave. Niro, however, split the fat noble's wooden sword in half in an instant. It was at this moment he knew. He messed up. Niro's opponent thought his sword must have broken because it's in bad condition. The instructor, hearing this, gave the fat noble another sword, but again, Niro split it in half with ease, much to the surprise of the instructor, Even, and the elf princess. Niro really be stomping kids. It was then that the instructor decided Niro was simply skilled with the sword. Shortly after, the instructors told the winners to move to the right and losers to the left. Surprisingly, Niro was the first one in the right side of the field, then the elf princess. The 2 talked to one another, with Niro addressing the princess as Miss. When the princess questions this, Niro explains that he was a slave, much to the confusion of the princess, indicating that elves were not familiar with the slave system. Ah, typical. Only humans have a slave system. Avon then arrives, and it turns out he met the princess 3 years ago. But the princess cannot remember. Even moves close to Niro, silently threatening him for beating a noble. Reminds me of my brother when he gets in trouble because of me in front of our parents. That night, we find the female slave's face visibly beaten up when the 3 nobles, including Even, enter the room. Since Niro beat one of the nobles, they decided to punish Niro by ordering him to act like a horse and riding on his back. They do the same to the female slave. Once the nobles leave the room, the female slave proceeds to cry, but Niro remains smiling, advising his fellow slave to keep smiling as well. In the next scene, we find Niro pointing a sword towards Even while he's asleep. Wow, that's completely unexpected. After contemplating the consequences of killing Even and the potential danger that it could bring to his sisters, Niro decided not to go through with his plan. He goes back to his bed, but that does not mean his anger has subsided. These noble kids still need to be taught lessons. The next morning, we see an instructor who's about to teach the class about magic. He explains that everyone has mana, including slaves, and it is what allows people to perform magic. The instructor then demonstrates this by instructing one of the students to shout Anakrasha, the chant to use magic, motivating everyone to do the same. While everyone is trying their best to use magic, Even shows off by using another chant to generate massive flames. What a show-off. Everyone, including the instructor, praises him for his achievement, but when no other student is listening, The instructor silently warns Evan that casting unpermitted spells at his young age is illegal, so he discourages Evan from going overboard with his magic. Yes, you tell him. Niro also produces large flames, albeit smaller than Evan's, but it dissipates into a small size shortly after. The instructor then takes the class to a field with numerous dummies. He intends to teach the class Fire Arrow. At first, the students were upset as it was one of the most basic spells, but the instructor showed them how destructive it can be given the proper skills. He then concludes by saying only the people who can hit the dummy with Fire Arrow can go home. Nice incentive. After that, everyone was busy trying to accomplish the assignment. Niro, too, was trying his best, but to no avail. Suddenly, a fire arrow launches into one of Niro's shoes, burning part of it in the process, and it's revealed that it's a misfire from one of the nobles in his group. Niro was upset about this as it was his only pair of shoes and it was made for him by his adoptive mother. I really wish the exam comes already and these two spoiled nobles are sent home. As the sun sets, we see Niro still trying his best to hit the dummy with his fire arrow. Aside from the instructor, he was the only one left in the field. When he finally succeeds, he thanks his instructor for his patience, but the instructor states that he knows Niro was holding back, and Niro must show his full potential if he wishes to avoid punishment. That's when Niro launches a large fireball to the dummy, destroying it completely. And that's when the instructor knew Niro was the MC. The instructor asks Niro the reason for hiding his strength, to which Niro answers is because he doesn't want to stand out. The instructor then realizes that Niro does not fear the nobles, but despises them. So he advises Niro to control his anger as anger will only consume him. Later, one of the instructors explained that the exam will begin in 3 days, and it'll be a test of strength. In this exam, 2 members in each group will fail. Finally, 3 days to go before the 2 spoiled nobles are gone. During the exam, they can only use 1 weapon and 1 spell, Fire Arrow. Their goal is to reach the end of a trail in which monsters will be lurking and will be trying to kill them. The students were shocked as they were never informed about this level of danger in the academy beforehand. But since the instructors can revive them if they were to die, it was perfectly fine. Apparently, in this world, people don't die if they are killed. Of course, many students were against this idea. The nobles, in particular, demanded that this was unacceptable. But the magic instructor explained that what happens to them is of no concern to their parents, as they are now soldiers. The parents have also agreed to these conditions. But if there's a student who wishes to forfeit before the exam, they can do so freely. Unsurprisingly, no one forfeits. So the exam will proceed without issues in 3 days. Lastly, the female instructor explains that at the end of the trail, there's a wooden bridge. Here, the students can defeat their group mates should they ever meet, since only 3 will remain in each group. This excited Niro, and probably the readers too. Finally, time for payback. As Niro wakes up the following day and he finds his shoes torn apart, it turns out one of the nobles in his group used it for his morning jog, destroying it in the process. These little shits really can't stop being annoying. But this just makes the payback much more worthwhile. The female slave asked the female instructor for a new pair of shoes, but it wasn't possible to get one. Then, the day of the exam arrives. Niro, Evan, and the 2 nobles are at the entrance of the trail, with the female slave nowhere to be seen and can potentially be disqualified, which upsets Niro. Regardless, the 4 start to their way to the goal. Niro struggles to navigate the trail and fight the monsters as he was barefooted. However, the female slave arrives, giving him a new pair of shoes she made with her own shoes. Must protect that smile at all costs. Despite being in tick-tock condition, the 2 nobles also struggle to defeat the monsters and even sustains injuries along the way. They talk big, yet they're this weak. Once they reach the intersection of the routes, they meet up with Evan. While they were talking, Niro takes the chance to go to the wooden bridge before them and prepares to defeat the nobles. Finally, the fat noble moves toward Niro, demanding him to move, but Niro refuses and stabs him in his shoulders. Niro then pushes the noble to the side, causing him to fall, but as promised, the instructor saves the noble from falling to certain death. The other noble walks towards Niro and swings his sword, but Niro easily blocks it, breaking the sword in the process. With no weapon, the noble uses Fire Arrow, thinking Niro cannot counterattack as he had no talent in magic. Little did he know, Niro was goated at magic. Much to the noble's surprise, Niro launches an even bigger Fire Arrow, causing the noble to fall. Now, it was Evan's turn to fight Niro, who asked why Evan knew destroying shoes would make it impossible for Niro to pass the exam. Evan refuses to answer, and their fight ensues. They were on equal footing at first, both in magic and swordsmanship, when Evan uses an unpermitted spell, teleportation. That cheating bastard Curious about its outcome, the magic instructor didn't interrupt the fight despite Evan violating the rules of using only one spell. After catching Niro off guard, Evan launches a powerful flame attack, causing Niro to almost fall, but he manages to hold onto the bridge's ledge. Evan then launches another flame attack to finish Niro off, but he was left unscathed as his pendant protected him. Item diff. Using this chance, Niro fires a fire arrow and knocks Evan off the bridge, but like Niro, Evan manages to hold onto the ledge. Little bro really pulled the Uno reverse card. Since only 2 can fail in the exam, Niro helped Evan climb back up. He then comes back for the female slave before finishing the course. In the first panel, we find Niro and the female slave talking at a rooftop about how they were able to get admitted to the academy despite their social status. That's nice, but can we get her name now? The female slave explains that she was an only child who grew up with her dad. Their master was a kind person, so when the master's son was drowning, her dad risked life to save the son. Unfortunately, her dad died, and the son was basically comatose. Since the son was originally planning to go to Excanum, the master gave the admission letter to attend Excanum to the female slave, hence why she was able to get admitted to the academy. It goes without saying that her master is infinitely better than the other masters in this world. Later that day, the students were instructed to gather around the storage house. There, they receive and promptly change into their uniforms as they are now official students of the academy. The headmistress congratulated them and wished them luck, before promptly disappearing. Afterward, the baldy instructor proceeds to group the students into 6. This time, even Niro the female slave and Niro are in separate groups. Finally, away from that mischievous little brat, Niro in particular is grouped with the elf princess he talked to before, Terasu, the descendant from the family of the Black Knight, Tarek, and 3 other side characters that are probably not worth mentioning. Tarek is probably the meathead character. Another difference this time is that the group will not share a single room. Instead, boys and girls will be separated into different dorms. When asked who wants to be the group leader, both Tarek and Terasu raise their hands, and they are tasked by the instructor to settle it themselves. They settle on deciding with strength. Tarek is confident since the Black Knight family was known for their strength, which is apparent when carries the boulder easily. They decided that the leader will be the one who can break the boulder into the smallest pieces. Tarek goes first and uses a sword to split the boulder in half. I knew it. He's definitely a meathead. Terasu is a bit more ingenious as she uses a bow and arrow to hit the 2 pieces of boulder, shattering them into smaller pieces. As a result, Terasu becomes the group leader, much to the admiration of Niro. Niro's group is gathered in the academy's hallway. There, they discuss the rules that each member of the group must adhere to, with Terasu leading the discussion. She explains the first rule that they must move and act as a group, so everything must be agreed upon by the majority. Secondly, boys must not come within 10 centimeters of the girls' dorms. The boys must also avoid opening the doors of their rooms without permission. Dang, if only my parents followed that rule. She explains that they must also call out their names if they wish to make contact. And third, there will be no difference between the ranks of the 6 members of the group. Most members reacted strongly to this rule, except Tarek. One member expresses concern that using informal speech to Terasu may not be appropriate as she was an elf princess, but he promptly yielded as Terasu explains that ranks in the elf society was not a sign of privilege, but a sign of achievement, and being a noble means they have bigger shoes to fill. As such, ranks were meaningless outside of their society. This enlightened Niro since all the nobles he encountered had used their title to take advantage of commoners and slaves. My boy was born in the wrong society. This rule also raised concerns from the 2 girls in their group as they complain that they don't want to be treated like Niro, a slave. They seek validation from Tarek, but Tarek explains that he's never seen slaves as people lower than him. Rather, he only values strength and has been friends with his slaves. He might be a meathead, but he's more mature than all the noble kids combined. All but Niro has given his opinion on this matter. Since they require the majority to agree to the rule, the girl asks Niro what he has to say. He responds by saying that he believes strength must be the basis of ranks, so he wants to be treated the same as the other nobles, unless they can prove they're stronger than him. Finally, he's standing up for himself. Niro realizes that not all nobles have the same mindset. Some think differently, like Tarek and Terasu. If only everyone was like that. As they were about to leave, they bump into the group of one of the elf princesses, the green-haired one, which is also the group where Evan belongs to. The green-haired elf teases Terasu since she has a meathead and a slave as her teammates, but Terasu makes a comeback by saying the green-haired elf should worry about his own teammate, considering how he got wrecked in the last exam. What a legendary comeback. After that, the two groups go their own ways. The atmosphere was a bit cold after that encounter, so Niro's groupmate explains to him that their rivalry was because they're fighting for the throne. Terasu, along with the two elf princesses, are the only candidates, and Terasu, in particular, must become a queen since her family hasn't had a queen for 7 generations. If she fails as well, her family may fall out of the royal family, hence why she's incredibly tense. The following day, the monocle instructor explains that the second exam would be a 3 versus 3 competition, where the team will be split in 2 and only the winning group will move on to become second-year students. Well, obviously Tarek, Terasu, and Niro will win. It's unfortunate. I like the other elf member. For that reason, in their first year, their focus will be on teamwork. Unfortunately, no one will know who's their teammate and who's their enemy before and during the exam. That's great. It discourages internal fighting and sabotages. They proceed in their first lesson, in which each member draws lots to decide the grouping. Terasu, Niro, and the other elf students are in the same group. Their goal is to head towards a boulder, all while their feet are tied together. This is to hone their mental focus. As soon as Terasu's group starts walking, the elf student slipped and broke his kneecap. Since Terasu is the competitive type, she threatens the elf student to get right back up, and they proceed to walk once again. Terasu's group continues to struggle with the exercise, but Tarek's group is easily dominating since he's carrying the 2 girls rather than walking in sync with them. Tarek is literally carrying his team. Back to Terasu's group, the elf student falls again, so Terasu promptly hits him repeatedly. Much to Niro's surprise, the elf student seems to be enjoying the attention. So, Niro does the same, and then the elf student, and that's how they lost the exercise. As they prepare to go back to their rooms, Tarek removes his uniform to reveal his muscular body, which the 2 girls admire. Tarek is the Riz Lord, but since it was inappropriate, Terasu threatens him to do that in their own room. So, the boys ran to their room, but rather than entering their room, they decided to peek at the girls' room instead, led by Tarek. Terasu catches them in the act and pulls a knife on them, leading the 3 boys to fall, who knew Tarek would be the pervert character. The next day, the group and the monocle instructor head to the spirit forest, where their first field examination will take place. The instructor explains that the forest is full of powerful spirits. He instructs Terasu not to use her power to commune with these spirits in this challenge, since the goal of the exam would be to get to the designated location while avoiding and defending against these powerful spirits. In the end, it requires teamwork as they have to watch out for each other's backs. He then signals the start of the challenge, but before Niro can get inside the forest, the instructor takes his pendant, indicating that the pendant may have a feature related to spirits. This pendant sure is more mysterious than Elle and Kira. In the next scene, we see the spirit of the ground who's about to hit Terasu. She instructs the orange-haired girl to cast the defensive earth spell, but the girl forgot the incantation, just as the hit was about to connect. Niro saves Terasu by blocking the hit with his body. After taking the hit, Niro falls to the ground. Terasu and the girl were worried for his life, but the instructor isn't worried as he casted a protection spell on the students when they were asleep. True enough, Niro woke up, clearly enjoying the attention, so Terasu healed him with her elf powers. Then, they continued to go their way. During the trip, Terasu states that she was thirsty, so Niro hurriedly looks for a leaf and uses it to gather water, which he then gives Terasu. Oh no, Niro has become a massive simp. During their conversation, the orange-haired girl senses movement nearby and shoots a fire arrow in that direction, hitting a hatchling in the process. Terasu recognizes that it's a green dragon's hatchling, meaning they become an enemy of the forest and the green dragon. Queen of the forest will soon appear, when a teammate triggers the boss fight while you're still unprepared. Once the queen arrived, everyone bowed down. Terasu communes with the dragon and offers their deepest apology, explaining that they didn't intend to hurt the hatchling. However, the queen cannot be convinced and states that only by offering the person who hurt the hatchling as a sacrifice will the queen's anger subside. Hearing this conversation, Niro takes the blame instead and explains how it all went, except rather than the orange-haired girl, he tells the queen that he was the one who hit the hatchling. After this, Niro was able to convince the queen to let this go, but after learning that Niro was a half-elf, which was considered the cursed race by the elves, Terasu was in shock. Terasu exclaims that half-elves are the cursed race and leaves. After that, the monocle instructor instructs Niro to come see him after the challenge. The group continued to head towards the designated location, and while in a fight against the water spirit, Niro casts a protective spell towards Terasu to protect her, but she dodges it intentionally and is hit by the spirit. She's griefing the team so hard. While Niro was helping her up, Terasu declines his help and tells him that she and him will be strangers from now on. After the challenge, Tarek greets them, but they don't greet back. Much to the surprise of Tarek, Niro proceeds to meet with the monocle instructor, who then explains the relationship between elves and half-elves. Nice, world-building time. He explains that half-elves have both the harmonious side of elves and the chaotic side of humans. These qualities amplify each other, so some half-elves are kinder than other elves, but unfortunately, the majority of half-elves succumb to their chaotic side and become darker and more sinister than the average human being. As such, half-elves are prone to being consumed by darkness. This explains why Terasu is giving him the cold shoulder. In the next scene, we see the three boys running towards the exam as they're about to be late. The three are clearly going alone. They then meet up with the three girls. Terasu is still upset by the fact that Niro is a half-elf. In the exam location, they were greeted by the female instructor and the monocle instructor, who explain that the next exam is a test of wisdom. Before proceeding with the test, they decide the groupings by drawing lots again. Niro, Tarek, and Terasu end up in the same group. FOMO, the elf student will most definitely get disqualified. Upon entering the testing ground, they find the Magnia tree, a tree that bears the all-cure fruit. Their objective is to chase away a bird called the Aragon that's nesting on the tree, so the Empire can collect the fruits more easily. They can use any method, but they must not harm the bird nor the tree. The instructor tells the group that they have until sunset to accomplish the objective. After he leaves, Terasu instructs Niro and Tarek that they don't do anything reckless as she tries to think of a solution, and she promptly leaves. Moments later, we find the other group going at it immediately. I bet they'll get disqualified right there and then. The black-haired girl uses her bow to shoot an arrow to perhaps startle the bird. The elf student tries to stop her, but she's already launched the arrow. This backfires and hits the stem of a fruit, causing it to fall. The professors appear right after and disqualify the group for wasting the sacred fruit. Oh man, too bad they had to take the elf student down with them. It was then that the professors explained that the purpose of this exam is to filter out soldiers who are unable to follow orders. Seeing this, Tarek assumes that they're group 1 by default, but the monocle professor explains that both groups can be disqualified in this exam, and there are no winners by default. So, Tarek and Niro continue to wait for Terasu to think of a solution. It's already past 2, so the two worried. At that moment, Terasu comes back with a snake. She plans to use these snakes to show the Aragon that her hatchlings will be at risk if the bird remains nestled in the 3. Unfortunately, this plan backfired as well as Aragon simply feeds the snakes to her hatchlings. Upon seeing this, Terasu instructs her groupmates to just YOLO and steal one of the hatchlings, but the Aragon is too strong and prevents them from climbing. Terasu, with all hopes lost, decides to use the same method as the previous group used to use a bow and arrow and threaten the bird. Again, it didn't work as the Aragon is too strong, and she falls on her knees. After much contemplating, Niro comes up with a plan to threaten the Aragon, a force of nature, with another force of nature. More specifically, he proposes to use a wildfire. Nice, my boy Niro pulling through for the team. Niro, Tarek, and Terasu proceed with the plan right away. They use their magic to generate a wildfire. The smoke startled the Aragon, but it wasn't enough. So, Terasu used an unfamiliar magic spell to amplify the flames, scaring away Aragon completely. And as such, they have passed the test. The monocle professor states that it was the perfect solution as Aragons were vulnerable to fire as they rely on the power of the wind. In the next scene, we find Tarek and Niro saying their goodbyes to a crying Jen, their elf friend, who then promptly leaves. Too bad, he was one of the decent characters in this story. Shortly after, Terasu arrives after taking a bath and asks Niro to come inside the room. The two boys react strongly as they have perverse thoughts about the situation. Inside, Terasu offers Niro some expensive tea, which Niro had trouble taking as it was too expensive. Then, Terasu explains her situation to Niro and why she acted coldly toward him. She tells the story of her uncle, a half-elf, who she was close to in the past. He was kind to her, even though he was shunned by her family. The uncle then fell in love with the housemaid, Adele, but due to the difference between their status, he was forbidden by the family elder to see him again. That's when he became corrupted by his chaotic side, leading to a massacre. I see there are also some assholes in the elf society. For that reason, Terasu has decided to never believe in anyone else again, especially half-elves, hence her attitude towards Niro. Niro reassures her that he won't take that path, and as the atmosphere becomes heated, Terasu takes a moment to shoot an arrow toward the window, which turns out is where Tarek is as he's trying to peek at the two. After that, Terasu leaves the room. Tarek really had to ruin the mood for Niro, lol. After having passed the second exam, the bald professor congratulates the remaining students. Like last time, they will be separated into different groups. That's too bad. I like the dynamic between the three. Unfortunately, Niro was grouped with a bunch of unfamiliar students. Terasu was grouped with one of the elf princesses and Even, while Tarek was grouped with Miria. Upon entering the room, they find that there's a mess, and like the entitled kids they are, they order Niro to clean the mess. Man, I wish he stands up for himself this time. They also assign him to be the group leader as they think it would be a hassle. In Tarek's group, the other groupmates have the same attitude towards Miria, but Tarek interrupts by making it clear that discrimination is not allowed in that group, and they must abide by that rule since Tarek is the group leader. Yes, you tell them. You magnificent, Meathead. Meanwhile, in Terasu's group, Terasu proposes that she be the group leader, to which one of the members suggests Evan is also a good candidate. However, Evan declines and lets them decide for themselves. That night, we see Evan taking his clothes off and activating his magic, which is apparently a way to test the limits of his blood. Evan might be more of a pervert than Tarek. Terasu appears and stops him as it's possible to die if he keeps going at it, but he explains that he'd rather die than lose and shame his family's honor. The next day, every group is supposed to gather, but Niro's groupmates didn't appear. The bald professor tells him that the next time they're late, he'd be held responsible. His teammates are total griefers. Niro continues to get discriminated against in his group as he's forced to do all the chores. For the next exercise, they were taken to the Skibus Hills, also known as the birthplace of life as it was brimming with plants and animals. Their goal here is to exterminate blade rams roaming around the area since this animal isn't supposed to be in the Skibus Hills. In other words, blade rams are an invasive species in this region. They got lost and are going to get killed for it. Sad life. The students are tasked with killing as many blade rams as they can. The group that hunts the most will receive the reward for this exercise. The students are also warned that blade rams cannot be hunted alone, so they must work together. Let me guess, Niro will be forced to hunt alone. However, since the professors are not there to monitor the students, they must be extra careful since they won't receive any help, no matter how much they need it. As expected, Niro's groupmates just left him alone, so he was forced to hunt the blade rams by himself. They have worse coordination and teamwork than people in public lobbies. Niro manages to find and kill one blade ram by himself. While resting, another one appears. Since Niro wasn't able to catch his breath, he wasn't able to kill the second blade ram. After a long fight, the blade ram manages to push Niro off a cliff where he was injured severely. He cannot move and was unable to do anything, even when vultures flock toward him. However, Niro appears and scares away the vultures. She tries to get to him, but she falls and injures herself as well. As I said, we must protect her at all costs. Niro proceeds to heal Niro of his injuries, which surprised Niro since the professors have yet to use healing magic. Niro explains that she figured it out by herself by healing her severely injured friend in the past. Wow, so Niro is talented as well. Niro tries to cast healing magic, but Niro tells him it might be an innate ability she was born with. Niro then asks Niro why she's still able to help people despite being treated unfairly by most nobles. To which she explains that she simply ignores the bad things that happen to her and focuses on her goals. Niro, however, disagrees as he wants to conquer those things instead of ignoring them. Let's agree to disagree. After that talk, Niro meditates in hopes of regaining his mana. Niro does the same. After a while, they were able to recover their mana and energy and made a plan to climb back up. Niro decided to simply carve a path to the outside, and that's the mindset he decided to have from now on. Finally, some character development. The two manage to climb back up, and one of the guards monitoring the students finds them and takes them back to the group. Upon tallying the scores of each group, the average was 3 rams, but Teresa's group managed to kill 5, making them the winner. Niro's group complained that they didn't win because they lacked one more person. Wow, the audacity these guys have. At that moment, Niro and Niria arrive with the 2 rams, which the guard states were Niro's kills, much to the shock of everyone. Niro's group starts to celebrate since that means they have won, but Niro decides to give the kills to Niria's group since she saved him. His group mates naturally become upset, but Niro stands up to them. My boy finally grew a pair. In the room that Terasu's group occupies, we see Evan taking a quick look at Terasu, indicating that he might be interested in her. Meanwhile, Tarek and Niria are taking a hike, when Niria twists her legs and falls, so Tarek carries her. We then see Niro using his sword on a tree. Right before cutting it down, he communes with it. It turns out he's trying to cut down a tree in one swing, but he has yet to do so. He's really going all in on the grind. 9 months later, the students are gathered in front of a gate. The bald professor explains that this is where the third examination, the test of endurance, will be held. Adult Miro's group mates get eliminated. In this exam, the goal is simple: survive for 2 months. They're provided food supplies that can't possibly last for even 1 month, so the students will have to come up with a source of food by themselves. The testing ground is a tree, a hog, and edible mushrooms mixed with poisonous ones. Thankfully, endurance is one of the strengths of Niro, but the exam is difficult nonetheless. 2 weeks later, we find one of Niro's group mates shooting an arrow at the hog. He successfully kills it and eats the meat. The next day, he finds that the meat is already rotten. He tries to eat it regardless, but he vomits everything and gets disqualified. The same happened to another one of Niro's group mate when he ate one of the mushrooms. Sirs, you're right. We also find another one of Niro's group mate who's about to get rammed by the hog but was promptly saved by the monocle professor. But as a result, he got disqualified. Finally, no one will miss them. Upon hearing the announcements of their disqualifications, Niro decides to make a move. He starts by communing with the hog, but the hog has been trained by the academy, so it didn't listen. Then, he sees the hog eating mushrooms and assumes that the hog must know which of the mushrooms are edible and which are poisonous. When he attempts to move closer, the hog scares him into climbing the tree. Then, the hog goes to sleep. The monocle instructor states that this exam will drive the students to show their true natures as their resources are heavily limited. True enough, the students are showing their true colors. Avon uses his overwhelming magic to intimidate the hog into obeying him. Terasu befriends the hog. Miria passed out due to hunger, so out of pity, the hog gave her food voluntarily. Tarek wrestles with the hog to decide who will bring food to the other. Yes, a meathead against another meathead, a match made in heaven. On the other hand, Niro decides to jump on top of the hog and basically rodeos the creature day and night. Once the hog runs out of stamina, Niro throws out crackers in front of it as an offering. He continues to do so until he's able to finally befriend the hog. After giving all of his crackers to the hog, Niro proposes that they survive together, and they eat the crackers together. We then see a contrast between Evan and Niro, where Evan is forcing the hog to get food for him, and Niro is coexisting harmoniously with the hog. The two are complete opposites. No wonder they don't get along. Another month has passed, and Niro has successfully passed the exam. As always, the headmistress congratulates the students and new groups of 5 are formed. Again, Ivan and Terasu are in the same group, but this time together with Niro. It's like Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura all over again. And like before, Terasu becomes the group leader. When another is being formed, Nuria was called, and as she goes to her group mates, she bumps into Niro. Niro then finds a much thinner and prettier Nuria. Oh, finally, the glow-up we've been waiting for. It turns out that after starving herself in the last exam and almost dying from hunger, Nuria lost a lot of weight. After greeting each other, they then go to their respective groups. Just like before, Terasu sets up the rules right away. She warns the 4 boys in his group not to come near her room. On their way back to their rooms, Niro bumps into Ivan, who, as always, expresses his irritation towards Niro. Little bro has no chill. In the next scene, we find the bald professor greeting Niro and the Terasu, which was a shock to Ivan since he greeted a slave before me. After that, the professor explains that they'll undergo a physical test. Nice. Niro will have his time to show off. The first exercise was to throw a heavy ball with a chain attached. The gray-haired noble went first, then Terasu, who threw farther than him. The other noble teases him for losing to Terasu before throwing the ball, but it also ended up falling short. Ivan then went next and was successful at throwing the ball farther than Terasu. Lastly, Niro threw the ball, surpassing the ball of Evan, even getting a bit salty. The next exercise was a running race. Terasu was able to dominate the competition since elves are known for their speed. So, Niro and Ivan were just fighting for second place. Niro was winning at first, but Ivan got incredibly salty that he was able to outrun Niro at the last second. Witness the power of salt. After the race, Terasu offered Niro a drink from her water bag, to which he responded by asking Terasu to drink first to see if it was poisoned. A callback to when Niro offered water to Terasu during their first year. They both laughed, which came as a surprise to Ivan since he rarely sees Terasu laugh. Ooh, Evan is getting a bit jelly. While Evan is carving a piece of wood, he sees Niro and Terasu conversing while drinking tea. Since he didn't think Terasu was the type to behave casually, Niro's intimacy with Terasu infuriated him. Evan is down bad. Later that day, the monocle professor meets up with Terasu's group. He tells them they'll be learning about large-scale magic attacks this time rather than single-target spells. He also explains that these kinds of spells require a massive amount of mana, so it's going to be difficult to master this type of magic attack. It shouldn't be a problem with the MC though. The professor then goes on to talk about the different types of jobs in this world. There are 3 primary jobs: Black Knight, which specializes in strength, Black Mage, which is suitable for people with large mana pools, and Archer, which is most compatible with people who have keen intellect like elves. Oh, so it's just like an RPG. Cool. Interestingly, there are also other jobs out there, like Dark Lords, as mentioned by one of Niro's groupmates. Turns out there are indeed other jobs, which are typically derived from the 3 primary jobs. For example, there was a Magic Swordsman, a combination of a Black Knight and a Black Mage. The current Emperor, Emperor Muren, is an example of a Magic Swordsman. But since this job requires immense talent, not many people can be Magic Swordsmen. So, basically, it's a rare class, just like an RPG indeed. The professor then proceeds to showcase one of the large-scale magic attacks they will learn, a Rufiona, which allows one to eliminate surrounding enemies. So, each student tries it out, starting with a black-haired noble. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to showcase his power. Next is Terasu, which was able to use it more effectively. Then, Niro goes on to try it as well, but he was even worse than the black-haired noble. Wow, didn't expect that from an MC. This shocked Niro since he knew he was talented in magic, but the professor explains to him that it might be due to a problem with his hearts, since it's what controls the flow of mana. Lastly, Evan goes ahead and casts the spell, and with the power of anger, he was able to showcase its full potential. He then declares then and there that he's going to be a magic swordsman, like the Emperor. This is Sasuke and Naruto competing for the Hokage position all over again. Due to his problem with magic, Niro decides to train intensely by casting a Rufiona repeatedly, but he still can't cast it properly. Meanwhile, Terasu just watches him from behind a tree. That's nice. Emotional support. 4 months pass. The bald professor takes the group to a valley where a mine containing Onmaru, a type of magic ore, is located. Due to the value of Onmaru, the valley has always been a place of bloodbaths and a place full of guards. However, since it is a rest day, the academy has decided to use that opportunity to train the students. The bald professor explains that the test is to find the entrance to the mine, which is small and hidden. The price is a piece of equipment and will only go to 1 person per group. Before the bald professor finishes the explanation, the group goes ahead to complete the task. Since this is a free-for-all activity, they go their own ways after defeating a couple of golem monsters. To each their own, I guess. Terasu continues to defeat every golem monster she stumbles upon. Then, she finds a large group of golem monsters in a field, when suddenly, a group of actual monsters appears to kill the golems. Then, we cut to Niro fighting the golem monsters, when suddenly, a man appears out of nowhere from a bush nearby, telling him to run. He wonders if this was part of the test, but it became clear that it wasn't when the guard was killed in front of Niro by actual monsters. Evan also finds a group of monsters in a field and realizes that this is no longer part of the test. Shortly after, he hears a scream. Unfortunately, the bald professor didn't hear this since he's sleeping in a cave behind a waterfall. Hey Baldy, your students are in danger. Niro, however, heard the scream, recognizing it to be Terasu's. Terasu got the short end of the stick there. We then find Terasu fighting a couple of the monsters by herself with her bow and arrow. However, it's clear that she'll slowly get overwhelmed as there are many more remaining. True enough, she runs out of arrows, and when she attempts to use a Rufiona, she realizes she's out of mana from using the magic arrows. Left with no way to fight back, the monsters attack her aggressively, but Niro comes to the rescue and kills the monsters. He tried to cast a Rufiona, but again, it didn't go off. His magic power is probably on a vacation right now. Seeing this, the monsters continue to attack the two, but Even also comes to the rescue and launches several magic missiles toward the monsters. With Even helping the two, they were able to hold their own against the army of monsters more easily. As the three stand side by side, the monster leader remembers the time when the three heroes were fighting against them 30 years ago. This time, however, Niro, Even, and Terasu are much weaker, so he commands his underlings to attack. This monster is really about to beat a bunch of kids. Niro states that he'll take the boss monster while Even and Terasu take care of the underlings, since Even is the only one who can cast large-scale attacks at the moment. However, Even, being the prideful noble he is, didn't agree with the plan. Regardless, Niro proceeds to attack the monster leader, but the monster beats him up easily after judging his swordsmanship. The monster really had the time to roast Niro. Even also tries to attack the monster, and though he did better than Niro, he was overpowered in the end and was punched, sending him to Terasu. Thankfully, he was able to block the damage with his mana shield. But now he and Terasu are out of mana, so Niro is their only hope. Come on, man. Show them who's the main character. Niro continues to defeat the small fries, but he's still unable to activate a Rufiona despite the immense amount of mana he feels within him. In the end, the monsters manage to attack him successfully. When Terasu was about to rescue him, he even stops her and suggests they run instead. We then cut back to Niro, who's having a moment in his inner thoughts. It's power-up time. After a while, he unleashes a massive wave of magic, eliminating all the monsters around him. After casting the spell, Niro falls unconscious. Distraught after the annihilation of his army, the monster leader tries to attack Niro, but the monocle professor appears and kills the monster, who then warns him that he's not the final boss. However, thankfully for the academy, the big titty headmistress is there and kills the boss instantly. The boss didn't even last for more than one panel. After the headmistress kills the boss, the other professors and guards proceed to annihilate the monster army. Then we find Niro in a cart being healed by the elf professor. Niro wasn't wearing a uniform, so when Terasu looked at him, she saw the pendant Niro was wearing and was surprised. Finally, they're gonna tell us what the pendant is. Back at the academy, the headmistress conducts an award ceremony for Niro, Terasu, and Even to reward them for their heroic act of fighting against the large army of monsters. Everyone cheered for Terasu and Even, but when it came to Niro, only Tarek and Neria cheered for him. But the other students followed suit. It was at this moment that Niro was able to receive praise from nobles. Nice. His life is finally changing for the better. After the ceremony, the bald professor tells them that they will be awarded 10 extra points for what they did, though it'll only be awarded in their 7th year. Each of them was also given an artifact. Niro thanks Evan for his help back in the valley, but even shrugs it off by saying he was simply testing his power. They then go their own ways when a professor teleports beside Evan and tells him the headmistress is looking for him. It turns out he was called because the headmistress wants to hand over the answer sheet for the last exam to Evan. Oh, you cheer. Just when you were getting better. In the next scene, the black-haired groupmate of Niro tells the group that the 4th exam will be a test of intelligence. As such, they are required to memorize the contents of the history book that is given to each of them. They have only 1 month to study, and they are to receive no help from anyone. That means there will be no study groups or anything of the sort. In addition, they can start studying tomorrow in the Great Library. Since Niro has been reading books since he was a kid, he was confident about passing this exam. What could go wrong? We then find Niro and Terasu walking in the hallway when Terasu suddenly asks Niro if he had read books about the elven family, to which he answers no since he didn't have books about elves. He asks Terasu where this question came from, but she just shrugs it off. Terasu is definitely hiding something. After that, we just see a montage of students studying and a scene where Niro was confused at the contents of the history book. After a month, the students finally received the results of the exam. Only 2 people failed, Ralph, who got 69. Nice. And Niro, who got 14 points. That's definitely sketchy. Since he failed, Niro was sent back home, escorted by 2 other slaves. On his way home, one of the slaves escorting Niro questions why he was relaxed, and promptly beats him. The slaves, Sarget, then explains that the Regis family permitted them to treat Niro as their slave, as his family is now the slave of the slaves. And here I thought only nobles were entitled. After arriving, Niro was greeted by Wendy and Sylvie. During their emotional reunion, a butler tells Niro that he's being called by his master. When he gets inside, the master throws a bottle at Niro, scolding him about treating Evan informally while inside the academy. Niro explains that they were ordered to behave that way, to which the elder master simply shrugs off, saying slaves should not talk back. As punishment, the master decided to sell off Nero's sisters. Much to Nero's terror, "You greedy bastard. I thought you were the good ones." What's worse is he's selling the sisters to Harvey, the killer of Nero's mother and father. Hearing this, Niro begs the master to kill him instead, but the master refuses. So, Niro goes to Harvey's house to beg him to buy him instead of his sisters. I really hope this guy dies soon. Ultimately, Harvey did decide to buy Niro after saying he's willing to do anything for him, even kill someone. When asked by the master why he changed his mind, Harvey explains that female slaves cost money to maintain, and male slaves are more profitable in the long run. Once they got to Harvey's home, Niro starts working right away, and for several days, he was overworked with minimal sleep. The author really likes doing the MC dirty. One night, the master calls Niro outside to vent his anger since he lost money. He proceeds by beating Niro to a pole with a whip. Harvey then provokes Niro by admitting that he's the one who killed his father by mixing poison in his medicine. He then admits to buying the mother and torturing her to death. Naturally, Niro became enraged and broke a piece of floor and prepares to stab Harvey. I can't wait to see karma hit this man in the face. Back at the academy, we see Tarasu walking in the hallway when he sees Evan talking about something related to Niro. Of course, it's aroused some suspicions in Tarasu, so she supposed a spirit to follow Evan's henchman. It turns out Evan was talking about Niro's book, and he ordered his henchman to burn it. But right before they burned the book, the spirit Tarasu summoned was able to snatch it from them. Yes, please tell me this will get Niro back to the academy. We then cut back to Niro about to stab Harvey, but he stopped knowing what would happen to his sisters. After that, Harvey continues to punish Niro while Niro utters demeaning words. Meanwhile, Tarasu is seen outside of a room, where the monocle professor interrogates the two henchmen of Evan. It turns out that the black-haired noble made a completely different version of the history book and gave it to Niro. That's why he failed the exam. The monocle professor tells them that they'll be executed if they don't reveal who ordered them to make a copy of the history book. So, they reveal that Evan ordered them. That's it. Evan is officially an irredeemable garbage. Hearing this, Tarasu was furious, so he went to find Evan and sees him with the headmistress, who enters a room. In the room, it was revealed that Evan and the headmistress had a deal, and since Evan has done his side of the deal, it's time the headmistress gives him his reward, which is to basically take his virginity. Wow, Evan is an even bigger simp than Niro. However, as they were about to do it, Evan declined, stating that he has someone else he liked, Tarasu, much to the shock of Tarasu, who heard this entire conversation. In the next scene, we find Harvey still punishing Niro, who has already lost all hope. Thankfully, before Harvey whips him again, Olmu, the professor with the monocle, teleports and stops him. He then explains that Niro is now a fourth-year student at the Excanum Academy and is therefore an official officer of the Empire, with a social status higher than a commoner. So, Harvey basically assaulted someone who is of a higher standing than him. After hearing this, Niro stands up and asks Olmu what the punishment for such an act is, to which Olmu answers yes. So, he grabs a bat, ready to enforce the law himself. Finally, this is what we've been waiting for. Niro prepares to kill Harvey, but Harvey pulls out a knife. Thankfully, Olmu helps Niro by restraining Harvey with a spell. As Niro was about to hit the man, he falls unconscious due to starvation. Dude got saved by the bell. After waking up, Niro ate until he was full, and he was once again ready to beat Harvey. Harvey tried to beg Niro to give him another chance, but Niro clearly didn't want to, as Harvey didn't give his mother another chance as well. But as Niro was about to kill Harvey, he remembers the story Tarasu told him about her uncle succumbing to his chaotic side. Fearing that he would succumb to it too after killing Harvey, Niro decided not to go through with it and left the house. Oh, come on. Seeing this, Harvey laughs at him, but thankfully, Olmu kills Harvey mercilessly. Olmu the MVP. Olmu takes Niro back to the academy, and on their way there, Olmu explains that the plan to sabotage Niro came from Evan. Unfortunately, since Evan has a lot of influential people backing him, nothing consequential will happen to Evan. What the? Of course. Back at the academy, we see the headmistress congratulating the 16 graduates of the Excanum Academy. All of them are now officers of the Empire, meaning Niro is no longer a slave. At this point, they will have to train and study for 4 more years in the academy, but there will no longer be disqualifications. 8 years? That's even longer than doctorate programs. During the ceremony, the headmistress realizes that there are only 15 of them there, which her assistant explains was because Marcus was disqualified and Niro will be taking his place. Much to the shock of Evan, but Turek, Tarasu, and Niro were glad to see he's back. The gang is back. As official officers, the 16 students now have different uniforms. Turek glances at Niro, but Niro looks for Niro. Oof, that must have hurt. Niro greeted Niro at each other, but Niro wasn't able to respond as she was flustered. Then, Tarasu appears and takes Niro to a private place. Once they're alone, Tarasu explains to Niro about his origins. It turns out that Niro is a half-elf from the Hill of Family, one of the royal families in the elf society. More specifically, he's the son of Queen Lunadel. So Niro was royalty all this time but was treated as a slave. Tarasu explains that only a select few have a pendant similar to Niro's. There was also a story alluding to the possibility that Queen Lunadel and the great sage Kundan may have had a child together, and that this particular love child was kept a secret and was later abandoned. Tying these two pieces of information together, it's likely that Niro is that child. Upon hearing this, Niro concludes that if it's true, Even would be his brother. Damn, I did not see that coming. Later that day, the bald professor announces that the remaining 16 students will each have their own room. As Niro enters his room, he feels a sense of accomplishment as he has now reached new heights. Finally, no more cleaning up other students' rooms. We also get to see Terasu outside her room in the hallway, along with Even, whose room is next to hers. Evan tries to start a conversation with her, but Terasu tells him that he should have been disqualified like his henchman for what he did to Niro, and that the Academy shouldn't have accepted people like him in the first place. Terasu do be speaking facts, but as Terasu is walking away, she recalls the time when he heard Evan tell the headmistress that he liked Terasu. We then cut back to Niro taking a bath at the bathhouse when Evan joins him. He congratulates Niro for no longer being a slave, but Niro voices out his anger by asking Evan why he tried to sell Niro's siblings to his mother's killer. He then tells Niro that he has no part in that arrangement, as he simply replies back to the Regas family by telling them about his current situation. However, Niro is still clearly upset and tells Even that he would kill him if he gets a chance, especially now that Niro is now an official that can exhibit his authority to nobles. You know they're brothers when they want to kill each other. In the next scene, we find Niro outside his room when Neria appears. Turns out Neria's room is next to Niro's. Niro praises her for getting first place in the test of knowledge. Niro then asks Neria for a favor, to teach him more about their world's history. Neria agrees and tells him that she can teach him every day after dinner. That's one way to ask for a date. The next day, Neria tells the story of the Mu Empire. The Mu Empire was 3 different kingdoms: the land of the knights, Laurentia, the land of mages, Aruka, and the land of the elves, Noria. This arrangement lasted for 842 years until the seers of Noria prophesied the coming of the demon lord Secneum. To prepare for this, the 3 kingdoms established the Excanum Academy. Secneum scared the shit out of the empire. The prophecy didn't come true for the next few centuries, but as people started to doubt the prophecy, all kinds of monsters appeared. Thankfully, the Excanum Academy has already produced powerful individuals like the Shai, who wielded the legendary sword, Arcdane, also known as the current emperor, and 4 other heroes: Tarek's father, the Black Mag Gangan, the 2 genius mages, Estremis and Kundin, and the Queen Lunadel. The war against Secneum's forces lasted for a long time, with the 4 heroes leading the efforts to stop the monsters. And at some point during the war, Estremis, one of the 2 genius mages, made a breakthrough in his research, which is that a sacrifice is necessary. We then find monsters gathered on a hill stating that Secneum's resurrection is nigh. Then, the 5 heroes appear and attempt to stop the resurrection, but to no avail. So, the 2 genius mages call forth the Divine Lord using their blood. The Divine Lord appears, and the 5 bow down, pleading for the Lord to save them. Secneum, who turns out to be a hot chick, tries to attack the Divine Lord, but it is ineffective. Then, Emperor Muren thanks and apologizes to the Divine Lord right before slicing him through his shoulders. The damage he sustains is then reflected in Secneum, which gives the heroes a chance to kill her. Apparently, the Divine Lord Lugard and Demon Lord Secneum are one entity, so what happens to one will happen to the other. After that battle, the body of Secneum is split into 3 pieces. These pieces are scattered throughout the world, and each contains tremendous amounts of power. These pieces are drawn to each other, and if they come together, Secneum will appear once again. Thankfully, one of the heroes had a device to seal these pieces, called the Eyes of Lugard, which have been guarded since ancient times. Unfortunately, they only have 2 of them, as one has been destroyed, and the people guarding it have disappeared. They probably ran out of milk and went out to get some. They sealed one of the pieces in Noria and the other one in Aruka. The 3rd one remains unsealed. A few years later, when the 3rd piece was coming close to another piece, the heroes decided to take action, and the plan was to seal the 3rd piece in the body of someone with a powerful body that has a lot of mana. So, one of the heroes must be the sacrifice, and Kundin is the first one to step up. The real MVP, taking one for the team. Queen Lunadel is upset at his decision, probably because they're lovers, but Kundin still proceeds with the plan. As he's about to make the sacrifice, we find out that Estremis, Kundin, and Queen Lunadel are in a love triangle. Better love story than Twilight. He teleports to the 3rd piece and takes it in. His fellow heroes come to check in on him, but it turns out that Kundin has been possessed and is being controlled by the demon god, so he attacks the heroes. Estremis blocks it with his shield, but the shield breaks and disintegrates his arm. However, he still has a plan. while the possessed Kundin is fighting Muren. Extremis teleports behind him and casts a spell. The spell sacrifices the user, Extremis, and this time successfully seals the third piece and Kundin. Poor Lumidel, both her lovers are gone. With the sacrifice of the two genius mages, they were able to seal a third piece. As Niro ends her story, Niro starts to shed tears, realizing the sacrifices that have been made. The next scene shows Evan and the headmistress in the same room. Evan tells the headmistress that he wants more power, and as payment, he gives the headmistress his blood, the same blood of the heroes in the past. She's quite literally bloodthirsty. The headmistress wonders why he wants more power if he's already the strongest among his peers. But as he recalls his encounter with Niro, he states that he's not even close. During all this, a spirit watches. When Evan leaves the room, Teresu corners him and tells him that she knows he's scheming something and asks why he wants to harm Niro. Evan replies by saying Niro is a slave, which upsets Teresu. Teresu tries to hit him for it, but Evan blocks his hand and calls Teresu a hypocrite, saying that even Noria has lower-class people. That's classic, shifting the blame to someone else. Teresu states that they are different because the nobles in Noria take their responsibility more seriously and don't look down on lower-class people. Evan then hugs Teresu out of nowhere. Evan finally admits the real reason why he's adamant about beating Niro. He is scared of Niro, as you should. We then cut back to Niro, who's walking in the hallway when he passes by 3 other students who mock him for being a slave. But unlike before, Niro doesn't take their bullshit and beats them up right there and then. Yes, join the dark side, Niro. Niro is more upset than before because these are the people his father had sacrificed his life for. And as he says this, Evan explains to Teresu that he wants to become a shy to save his father. Evan asks Teresu for advice, but Teresu doesn't take his bullshit and basically tells him he's a spoiled brat, unlike Niro, who had to face difficulties all his life. Yes, you tell him. In the cafeteria, we find the students of the academy eating mindlessly, while Niro cannot help but be upset. He then lashes out, which shocked the students, before leaving the building. Outside, he vents his anger by cutting down a tree. He's upset that the people who his father gave his life for turned out to be greedy pigs, so he sets out to change this system. In Neria's room, we find that she's preparing an almond, and she plans to give this to Niro, which in this world is the equivalent of giving chocolate to a crush on Valentine's Day. Then, in the next scene, Niro is beating up his fellow students, clearly upset about something. They probably insulted him again or something. While he's beating up a student, Tarek stops him and tells him he's going too far. Turns out the student did insult Niro. The student threatens to tell his father, but Niro threatens him back by saying that if he becomes the shy, he'll take revenge on that student if it ever comes to that point. Tarek scolds him again, but Niro responds by saying he's the same as them. Oh, now you're going too far. Niria and Teresu witness this scene, so Niria holds off giving Niro the wrapped almond. As Niro sits on the stairs, Teresu talks to him about his goal to become shy. Niro explains that the world his father tried to protect with his life has now become corrupted, littered with people who are greedy and are willing to treat other people's lives like trash, similar to how people treated his family. He wants to become shy in order to change the world. Even hears this as he is taking a peek at their conversation. You sneaky bastard. Finally, Niria was able to present the almonds he packed to Niro, which is probably the same as confessing her feelings, but Niro refuses. Be nice to her. God damn it. In the next scene, Teresu gives Niro several almonds, but this time, Niro accepts and they kiss, and since Evan was watching, he sees this as well. Dude got cucked for real. He then throws a tantrum in his room. It turns out Tarek was also planning to give Niria almonds, but he decided not to. In Niria's room, we see Niria crying. So much drama. The next day, the bald professor gathers all the 4th-year students and tells them they're going to test their swordsmanship like before. This time, however, their goal is to fight the bald professor with swords alone, and they will be awarded points according to what they can do, be it hitting him, making him fall over, or disarming him. A couple of students go at him at once, but he managed to fend against them. Tarek and Evan also give it a try, but they just got insulted by the bald professor before getting knocked down. They try again, but the results were the same, so Niro also gives it a try. He's doing better than the two, and with his technique, he was able to split the professor's sword in half, in which, effectively disarming him, much to the shock of everyone. He really has a talent for breaking swords. So, the professor surrenders. Niro taunts the other students by saying they can't surpass him, but this upsets even so much that he activates his magic. The bald professor tries to stop him, only to be entangled with his magic. He then attacks Niro, but Niro successfully dodges every time. Tarek also tries to stop Even, but Even uses magic to knock him out. He also warns the other students to back out if they don't want to be in danger. Niro runs towards his sword and equips it to prepare for battle. They then get in heated combat, and Even uses an unfamiliar spell. Turns out Even wants to kill Niro because he kissed Terasu. Even is very jelly right now. Their battle continued for a short while until the headmistress interrupts by knocking them both out with her magic. Lol, one-shotted. A week later, Niro and Even meet again with each other, but they just ignore one another. Tarek meets up with Niro and explains that the next time Niro gets in a fight, he'll get expelled, and he only avoided punishment because Even started it this time. Tarek then proceeds to hit Niro as he's upset how Niro, despite being nursed back to health by Neria, tells Neria to leave him alone. Yeah, Niro needs to learn a lesson. After that, Neria shut herself in the room and cried, which clearly upset Tarek. But Niro doubles down by provoking Tarek further, so Tarek hits him again. But Niro didn't retaliate. Before leaving, Tarek tells him that he never thought Niro or Neria was different from him. Yeah, he was always lovable. Niro realizes that his chaotic side is showing and only hopes that Neria remains on the other side. In the following scene, we find Niro and two other students running towards what seems to be a large tower with a couple of people, one of which is revealed to be Emperor Muren. Please teach Niro a lesson. The students show their respects to the Emperor with their formal greeting. The Emperor congratulates the fourth-year students and gives a motivational speech right before explaining to them the Empire's problem right now, which is the increasing activity of Secneum's forces. He then explains that as soon as the students complete their exam that year, they'll be put on the front lines, and encourages them to prepare until then. With that, he concludes his speech and leaves. The students express their concerns after realizing that their peace might soon be disrupted because of the war. Great, that means more action and less drama. We cut back to Niro walking in the hallways, reminiscing about the time the Emperor saved him in the mines and gave him his sword. He then enters the room where the Emperor stays. The Emperor cheerfully greets and congratulates Niro for becoming an elite soldier of the Empire, as well as for his past achievement in defeating the monster army in the Omaru mine. But at the same time, the Emperor mentions Nero's fight with Even and how he's showing hatred towards nobles. Niro apologizes and the Emperor tells him he understands, as the Emperor was probably in the same position before. Niro asks for guidance, but the Emperor simply tells him he needs to train his heart in the same way he trains his sword. After that, Muren asks Niro if he's ready to train his magic swordsmanship. Nice. Are we getting a training arc this time? In the next scene, we find Evan enduring flame magic that's coming out of Muren's sword. That sounded sus. Turns out Muren is also training Even, though this time, he's encouraging Evan to use his anger rather than control it, which is the exact opposite of his advice to Niro. Muren is two-timing. Elsewhere, Terasu is reminiscing about the time she was kissed by Niro, but she also recalls the time Even hugged her. Terasu is also two-timing. 3 months later, the bald professor, along with the other professors, explain the rules of the next exam, the test of mercy, to the students. The exam shall be taken in groups of 2, and they must defeat enemies along a path. The more they defeat, the more points they'll earn. What makes this exam different is that they can kill other students, though this will reduce their total points. This rule naturally shocked all the students. Battle Royale vibes. With that, the students began to form groups. Neria was the most in demand, since they assumed being in a group with the weakest student would lower their chances of being killed. Amidst the requests of other students, Terasu's spirit comes to ask Neria to partner up with her, and so she does. Tarek was upset with this as he sees through the intention of the other students, and because of this, the remaining students were hesitant at grouping up with him. But while this was happening, Niro and Even has already formed a group. Upon seeing this, Terasu recalls his encounters with the two where she gave them her advice for their problems. Neria also reminisces about a similar encounter with Niro where he finally confronts her and tells her about his situation and why he cannot stand by her. After that, Neria simply cries and we see Niro becoming nostalgic for the shoes Neria made for him in the past. This story has more drama than Twilight. We then cut back to the present, where Niro and Even proceed to go to the forest. We also find Tarek and a black-haired student, who's noticeably nervous since Tarek can easily kill him. But Tarek reassures him that he won't. They find a rabbit, but Tarek argues that the point of the test of mercy is to bestow mercy on adorable creatures like the rabbit. But at the moment, the rabbit becomes a monster and eats a raccoon. Kill it with fire. Our main characters witness this as well. Terasu proceeds to kill the rabbit, and at this point, we realize that the test of mercy tests the student's ability to distinguish whether they should grant mercy or not. Meanwhile, Niro and Even unsheathe their sword after seeing this, but rather than attacking the rabbit, they attack each other instead. While this was happening, Olmu, the monocled professor, is watching the fight. We cut back to Terasu and Niria. Terasu asks Niria why she likes Niro, but Niria comments that she has already given up as he has someone else he likes, Terasu. However, Terasu mentions that Niro used to like him, and it's all in the past now. We then see a flashback of Terasu and Niro's conversation. In it, Niro explains to Terasu that his feelings for her were that of responsibility, much like what he feels for his twin sisters. She just got sister-zoned. He then continues to talk about his flaws, why he saw Terasu as a ray of hope, and the fact that he came to like Terasu because she's what Niro aspires to be. In the end, Niro decided to put a stop to his effort to change himself, and that's also when Niro and Terasu decided to hold off on their feelings. While Terasu is telling this story, Niria cries as she was deeply concerned for Niro and wants to comfort him with all her being. Elsewhere, Niro and Even continue their fight. At first, Niro was getting pushed back and was even injured by Even, and hence, the trash-talking began. Again, we cut back to Terasu and Niria's conversation. Terasu realizes that Niria's feelings for Niro was that of a mother who wants to protect her child, the opposite of what Terasu feels for Niro, as she saw Niro as someone to admire and respect rather than protect. But instead of saying this, Terasu instead tells Niria that her feelings for Niro are similar to hers. In the next scene, Niro and Even are still fighting. The two are fighting evenly, so Niro decides to use the skills the Emperor taught him, but Even also does the same. When their sword clashed, the two realizes that they were both trained by the Emperor. This enraged Even, causing him to attack more furiously, and successfully pushes back Niro. Niro retaliates and disarms Evan, trash-talking him right after. Of course, Evan doesn't take this lightly and says Niro and everybody else are failures. He then uses his monster-like magic, only to end up getting knocked down again by Niro. So, Evan uses an even more sinister magic similar to that of the power of Secneum. At this exact moment, Kundin, who is sealed with the third piece, opens his eyes. Upon seeing Evan's appearance, Niro realizes he uses the same power as Secneum. After a bit of trash talk from Even, Niro attacks Even, cuts off his arm, and stabs his heart. Even still couldn't beat him with all his power-ups. Lamau. Elsewhere, Terasu kills a monster right before asking Niria if she thinks she can overcome the gap Niro has made between him and his peers. We cut right back to Niro and Evan's fight. Even surrenders, but he still shows remorse towards Niro as he claims Niro has been taking everything from him. Little bro got cucked and became a villain. Niro responds by saying they should just talk it out, and he is entitled to it. Niro then reveals that he's Evan's half-brother while showing his pendant, much to Evan's surprise. Evan was doubtful at first, so Niro shows him the pendant and explains what it stood for. He then tells Evan how he was abandoned and adopted by slaves, hence his origin. After that, we see a flashback of what exactly happened between Lumidel and Kundin. Turns out the two had to go their own ways because they both had to protect their home. Kundin is also meant to have a political marriage with someone else. Kundin tries to convince Lunadel to stay with him instead, but to no avail. Even in this world, politics suck. With that, Kundin gets into a political marriage with Evan's mother. Then, the war raged on, so Kundin decided to head to battle despite his wife's persuasion. In the war, Kundin gets injured during his fight with a monster. So, Lunadel rushes to the camp where Kundin is residing and finds Estremis and Kundin. Estremis cannot fully heal Kundin, so Lunadel decides to heal him instead. However, this method shortens the lifespan of the user, so Estremis objected, but Lunadel goes through with it nonetheless. If only my healer in games is this selfless. Kundin wakes up to find Lunadel, and the two get into an emotional reunion. After that, Kundin comes back to his hometown. Evan's mother comes to greet and hug him, but Kundin ignores her. That's when Kundin explains his relationship with Lunadel and how she's pregnant with their child, much to the grief of Evan's mother. Everyone is a two-timer, apparently. After that, Kundin tells his wife he'll be leaving, and she should just think of him as a dead person. The mother was upset, as they were about to have a child. So before leaving, Kundin gave his child the name Even. Don't worry, he'll probably come back once he gets some milk. A few months after that, the war ended, so Kundin must have already been sealed at this point. That's when the rumors regarding Kunden's and Lunadol's child spread, though that rumor died out shortly after. In the next scene, we find Muren being crowned as the Shah and Emperor of the Empire. Every kingdom, including Valencia, Noria, and Aruka, witnessed this crowning ceremony. After that, he meets with Lunadel, curious if the rumors about the child are true. Lunadel confirms the rumors. The two worries as this child will most definitely get caught up in the fight for the throne if he's discovered, but Muren reassures Lunadel that he'll stop the rumors. After that, we see a scene where Evan was born and Niro was adopted by his slave parents. Upon hearing this revelation, Evan becomes even more furious since that means Niro was the reason his father left them. No man, he left for milk. So Evan becomes even more insistent to kill Niro, but Niro refuses to battle to the death. Their battle continues after Evan gets another power-up. Damn, how many power-ups can you have? You're not even the MC. With it, he's able to push back Niro in their battle. Elsewhere, Tarek and the black-haired student have just finished their battle against countless monsters. The two are curious why some are extremely aggressive, while others were passive. Lol, they killed even the innocent monsters. We cut right back to Niro and Evan's fight, in which Niro has finally given up. Evan now has the chance to kill him, but after a flashback montage of his experience in the academy, Evan decides not to kill Niro. He then realizes that they are fundamentally the same. Here comes the power of friendship. At that moment, the seal stopping Kunden from going loose cracks. It also turns out that Muren had planned for this to happen. As mentioned by the headmistress, Hydia. After the exam, the professor goes ahead and tells the score of each group. Tarek's group got 0 since they killed everything in sight. Others got a positive score. Terasu got -4 since she probably killed an innocent creature, and Niro and Evan got -5. Niria, despite being in the same group as Terasu, gets 7 points because she didn't kill anything. With that, she's the leading candidate for Shah, much to everyone's surprise. Everyone got stomped on by Niria, lol. The students gather in the hallway as always, and the headmistress greets and congratulates them for completing the 5th exam. She then announces that next week they'll be sent to the front lines, as mentioned by the Emperor. But before that, there will be a banquet held in Aruka for the students, and they must get a dance partner who they'll spend 5 days with. So, basically, it's a school dance. This is becoming more and more like a drama story. In the next scene, all the students are gathered in the cafeteria. This was the perfect chance for students to get a dance partner, which is why that's been what's in the mind of most students. Evan comes to sit at the same table as Niro. Are they friends now? But turns out Evan just wants to ask Niro if it's fine to ask Terasu to be his dance partner, since Niro and Terasu are no longer as close as before. Before Niro can answer, Evan goes for it anyway and asks Terasu to become his dance partner, to which Terasu agrees. Evan then comes back to Niro's table after. The next day, the students prepare to leave. The bald professor briefs them on their journey to Aruka, where the banquet will be held. Each couple is assigned to a royal carriage. Before going in, Niro finds Tarek and Niria, as well as Terasu and Evan going inside their respective carriages. In Niro's carriage, we find him with his partner, who's reading a book. She didn't want Niro to talk to her as she doesn't want to get close to him. Fair enough. Meanwhile, in the other carriages, Tarek and Niria get along well as Tarek tells her stories of his childhood. On the other hand, Terasu and Evan have a more meaningful conversation, as Terasu asks Evan why he's always with the headmistress. Evan explains that people comparing him with his father, as well as Niro's appearance, resulted in his inferiority complex. That's why the headmistress offered to give him more power in exchange for blood was a tempting deal. The power he got from the headmistress was the power of Secneum. Though it surprised him at first, he has come to accept it as part of his own. The journey continued and our characters began to come closer because of it. And all this time, Niro is just bored out of his mind. The carriages then stop and the students are ordered to stay in an inn nearby. As the students are getting out of their carriages, Niro finds Tarek and Niria and Terasu and Evan, who are much noticeably much closer than before. Oof, that must be painful. As they walk to their inns, Niro is slowly realizing that he's hurt, though he doesn't understand why at first. This is his first heartbreak after all. This continued until the end of the day. The next day, the students continue their journey to Aruka via carriages. Terasu, upon seeing the violin in their carriage, asks Evan to play it. Evan goes along with it and plays a song. In another carriage, we see Tarek and Niria still talking about their childhood, though Niria is the one doing the most talking this time. All the while, Niro is struggling to converse with his glasses partner. In the next scene, the students are on a boat. Niro witnesses Terasu even bonding. He's getting jelly now. So he leaves his glasses partner to lie down, but he also witnesses Niria comforting Tarek, who is seasick. He gets even more jelly. Finally, they arrive in Aruka. While in his room, a butler comes to give Niro his outfit, which he then wears. During a banquet, we see Niro being approached by two nobles, who probably want to make connections with him after assuming he's from a prestigious family. But upon knowing that he's a slave, they awkwardly withdraw. Lol, little bro probably has a noble repellent. After that, he finds Terasu in her beautiful outfit and is mesmerized by it, until Evan greets him in a friendly manner. Oh, are they actually friends now? Right after that, Evan gets into a dance with Terasu. How the turns have tabled. He also sees Niria and Tarek dancing, which probably makes him extremely jealous. Niro continues to be heartbroken after seeing Tarek and Niria closely dancing. It also made him realize he probably had feelings for Niria as well. He struggles to control his emotions, but then he looks at the glasses of alcohol and recalls the time when his father used to drink alcohol to supposedly forget his emotions. So Niro chugs a lot of alcohol. Oh no, he's an alcoholic. In another scene, we find Olmu, the professor with the monocles, dancing with the elf professor, who praises his ability to dance. Bro got the riz. At that moment, Olmu lets go of his partner and go back to being his vigilant self. Never mind. He realizes that the headmistress who likes to be the center of attention isn't there, so he assumes she's plotting something. True enough, he finds the headmistress plotting something with a suspicious person. The headmistress talks about the students in the battlefield, but Olmu cannot hear their conversation properly. He tries to get closer, but he alerts the headmistress, who instantly shoots a fireball in his direction. Thankfully, Olmu was able to teleport away. Back at the banquet, Niro was already drunk. Because of this, he proposes to dance with everyone he sees. As he's about to fall over, Terasu grabs his hand and keeps him standing. She then tries to escort Niro to his room. Even sees this and escorts Niro instead since he's technically his brother. Slowly but surely, Evan is getting softer. In the next scene, we find Tarek and Niria on the balcony. They were about to kiss, but Niria decides against it as she still has feelings for Niro. There's more drama here than in Wattpad stories. Meanwhile, Niro tells Evan he likes him, only to find out that Niro was referring to Niria. The next morning, we see Niro waking up from his hangover. He roughly recalls what happened that night, which embarrassed him. He then finds a letter, which is most likely from Evan, telling him he'll kill Niro if he ever has to do that again. Evan is a tsundere. Elsewhere, Olmu is checking a list of names of students and realizes that those who can potentially become a threat are separated from others. He proceeds to burn this list and make a new one, declaring that he's rebelling against the headmistress. As always, Olmu is the real MC of this story. The students gather in the hall. Niro and two other students arrive later, so they were scolded by the vice principal. Afterward, the vice principal announces that they'll be dispatched to Aruka and Noriev to fend off against Secneum's forces. This mission will serve as their 6th exam, the test of authority. This surprised not only the students but also Olmu. The students are then divided into 2 groups consisting of 8 students each. Group A will go to Aruka and Group B to Noria. The vice principal announces the students in each group. Unfortunately, Tarek is the only main character in Group A. The rest, including Niro, Terasu, Niria, and Evan, are in Group B. As they prepare to leave, Olmu tries to warn Group A, specifically Tarek, to do his best to survive. Why'd you have to give my boy Tarek a massive death flag like that? The students bid their farewells to their friends. Niria gives Tarek a bracelet she made herself, and Terasu bids farewell to the green-haired elf princess. With that, each group starts its journey toward the different regions. In the next scene, we find a camp of soldiers struggling to fend off against Secneum's forces. They brief the professors about their situation and how the enemies seem to have known about their attack. There's an imposter among us. After that, the bald professor announces that the army will be led by the professors and students. Olmu splits the army into 4. The first squad will be Niro and Niria. The second squad will be led by Terasu and Evan. And the third squad will be led by the remaining 4 students. In other words, the students will become the lieutenants of each squad. The students didn't know what to do at first, so Gerard, the bald professor, scolds them and tells them they should be more serious than ever as they're on the battlefield. Hopefully, there will also be less drama. After that, each student goes to their platoon. We first find the platoon assigned to Niro and Niria. When asked who's the lieutenant, Niria pushes Niro as she's too shy to introduce herself. At that moment, we get a flashback montage of Niro's journey to become a soldier. Then he gives a motivational speech to the soldiers, which boosted their morale. After much planning, the army has decided to set out in 3 hours. Once the other people have left, Niro asks Olnu why they're not sending anyone to save the slaves that are being attacked by 100 monsters. However, Olnu argues that the life of the Lord is more valuable than that of the slaves. Hence, it is in their best interest to focus on saving the Lord, since they can gather supplies more easily that way, which is far better than gaining 500 manpower. Of course, this upsets Niro, but he cannot do anything as this was an order. In the castle, we find the Lord and the nobles worried out of their minds as they're getting besieged by the monsters. The Lord demands to see Kara, who's probably a powerful officer, but it was revealed that she left 10 days ago to help the slaves. Great. Yet another comrade for our main character. Of course, the nobles and the Lord were upset at this news. Elsewhere, we find a priest, who's probably Kara, maintaining a barrier that's protecting the slaves. Turns out Kara has been maintaining the barrier for a week. Kara, the new MVP. I hope she meets with the MC. The opposing army's leader assumes that the barrier must be weakened right now, so he sends his minion to test it out. True enough, the barrier is becoming weaker, though it's still strong enough to burn the minion's hand. So, the leader commands his underlings to throw whatever they can find into the barrier. Inside the barrier, a soldier tells Kara that reinforcements from the army are coming, but Kara knows that the reinforcements are probably not for them, but for the nobles and the Lord, her adoptive father. Kara then states that she cannot hold on any longer. At that moment, the monster leader attacks and successfully breaks the barrier. Right before the monster kills Kara, he hears the sounds of battle from a distance. We then see Niro fighting the monsters. MC to the rescue. After his valiant entrance, the remaining members of his platoon head toward the monsters. A soldier gets knocked away, but he was instantly healed by Niria, healer Diff. Seeing the two students' abilities, the soldiers fight with boosted morale. Meanwhile, back in the main army, the bald professor calls for Niro's group, but no one responds. This is giving me group chat vibes when you ask someone for help. Someone then says they went for the slaves, prompting Olmu to realize that this insubordination may just cost Niro everything. At least the MC is following his belief. Kara wakes up and finds that she's still alive. She then sees Niro fighting the monster leader. Meanwhile, the castle is still being sieged. The Lord receives news that the army is sending reinforcements, albeit it's a bit smaller now since Niro's squad is not taking part. Yeah, he's kicking ass right now. The main army remains skeptical since they've already lost part of their forces, but they still proceed to plow through the countless monsters sieging the castle. They manage to enter the outer wall of the castle with the professor's help, but at the same time, the monsters were able to enter the castle where the nobles and the Lord reside. Elsewhere, Niro is held by the neck by the monster leader. Never mind, he's not kicking ass. Niro has his sword deep in the monster's chest, but the monster simply regenerates the wound, so Niro cannot take the sword out. But as the monster is in the middle of trash-talking him, Niro casts a spell and blows up the leader. With that, the soldiers begin to counterattack more furiously. Kara then thanks Niro for protecting the slaves. Yes, is that another ship? During the battle, the slaves thank Niro, but rather than simply accepting their thanks, he encourages them to step up and protect themselves with their own hands. He then explains that he was also born as a slave. With this, he was able to encourage the slaves to take up arms even though slaves aren't allowed to hold weapons. Nice, plus 500 soldiers. We then cut back to the main army, who are slowly getting surrounded by the monsters. The professors too are running out of mana and stamina, but right before they get completely overwhelmed, the sounds of another battle come from a distance. It turns out Niro, his squad, and the slaves have successfully defeated the 100 monsters and have come as reinforcements. Witness the power of the MC. Niro instructs the slaves to take a weapon from fallen monsters and soldiers if they still don't have one. Then, he meets with Olmu, who slaps and reprimands him for disobeying orders. However, as they are still in combat, they make a battle plan. The monster captains arrive, so they intend to fight them if they want to proceed. Olmu casts a buff on Niro and Avon and instructs them to save the noble and his son. I wish my teammates are as reliable as Olmu. During the battle, everyone heard a voice in their heads. It turns out Kara, the priest, is talking to them using sacred magic. She then instructs everyone to envision the Divine Lord Lugard in the count of 3, and so they did. Because of that, everyone received the blessing of Lugard, a buff that gives them an enormous amount of power. With this buff, they were able to defeat the monsters easily. Now that's what I call support diff. Niro and Even then find their way through the horde of monsters using an invisibility spell. Upon entering the castle, they're met with the main leader, who's holding the Lord by the neck with magic and tells them they're too late. Who cares? He was a useless lord anyway. In the next scene, Kara instructs other soldiers to gather the injured in one area. Once that's done, Kara attempts to heal them with her magic, which she was able to do successfully. However, as more injured soldiers come to her, she was unable to continue as she's running out of mana. Niro sees this and asks how to cast that healing spell. Great, a power-up for Niro. We then cut right back to Niro and Evan, who was easily defeated by the monster leader. The leader explains while holding Evan by the neck that it cannot defeat him since he has the power of Secneum. Upon saying this, a blue trident stabs him in the back. He was able to retaliate since Evan, too, has the power of Secneum, much to the monster's surprise. And with this chance, Niro was able to cut off the leader's head, successfully defeating him. As they say, brothers who kill together, stay together. Meanwhile, Niro is trying to cast the sacred healing magic that Kara cast earlier. She expresses her desire to save the soldiers, and with her earnest request, the Divine Lord responds. So, Niro successfully cast the healing magic, healing the injuries of every ally on the battlefield. Niro is extremely OP. With that, they were able to win this battle and everyone celebrates. After the war, Kara was crowned as the master or lady of the region, since the previous was killed in the previous war. She then declares that slaves can bear arms, seek education, and join the military. Wow. So it was actually a good thing the previous lord died. Nice. Kara then thanks Niro and Niro for coming to their rescue when nobody did. Upon seeing this, Olmu recalls how the current emperor, Muren, made everyone bow before him despite being a slave. And this time, Niro, who's also a slave, was able to make everyone raise their head. Oh, that's probably why the title is Slave B. The emperor is the slave A. In the first scene, Niro is being pulled by tentacles while reaching out for Niro, only to fail. Lol, that's a scene straight out of hentai. But it turns out that has yet to happen. 1 week prior to that, we find the professors planning a battle. This time, the students are grouped into 3, since there are 3 strategic points they should cover. Oh, just like a MOBA then. With that, the students proceed to travel to their respective regions. During their journey, Niro recalls his encounter with Olmu. Olmu tells Niro that while he did save him this time, he shouldn't do this again as he may be executed or even brought back to slavery next time. Of course, this upsets and even confuses Niro, since he's torn about whether he should save unprivileged people like slaves or just follow orders. Seeing this, Niro gives a look of concern. Even after all the drama, Niro is still the best girl in this story. Upon arriving at their destination, the bald professor leads the charge to attack the monsters. Niro finds it easy to kill the monsters, since they're already tired of fighting the soldiers. He then hears a scream from a distance, and finds that Niro is about to get killed by a monster. Thankfully, Niro managed to kill the monster before his attack connects. Niro then instructs Niro to stay near him and don't leave his sight. Oh no, Niro is cucking Tarek too. After a long day of fighting, they were able to kill all the monsters successfully. They were then welcomed by the soldiers inside the castle. However, seeing how weak the monsters are, Juror asks why the soldiers struggled against them. It turns out that they were also busy dealing with slaves that are laying siege upon the soldiers. They probably treated those slaves like trash. Because of the revolt, the supply lines of the soldiers were cut off, hence why they were also exhausted. Upon hearing this, Niro asks the soldiers what they did for the slaves to act like this. However, the soldier responds by saying they don't know what's causing them to revolt. But Niro argues that instigators always forget the terrible things they do. Before they get into a heated argument, the bald professor stops them and asks the soldier to open the gates, as they will attempt to clear any misunderstanding between the slaves. Upon entering, they find a group of slaves ready to attack. The bald professor raises his hand and tells them they were sent by the emperor. So, the slaves lay down their arms. Wow, that slave looks like Slave C. As Niro looks at the slaves, he assumes that they must have been cornered into a dead end, and he knows the feeling well as he has been in their position in the past. In another place, a soldier brings Olmu news that Cephas is leading the charge in one of the 3 fortresses getting besieged. He then instructs the soldiers to send reinforcements that way immediately. Tirasu asks who Cephas is, to which he explains is one of the leaders who can turn people into emotionless beings with only their darkest thoughts. Mind control, that explains why we got a scene out of hentai earlier. It was then foreshadowed that the slaves in the fortress that Niro and Niro were assigned to are probably being controlled. While on their way to the inner castle, Gerard asks the slave leader what caused them to revolt, to which the leader answers was, because nobles are greedy. They restricted the slaves' food supply and didn't allow them to arm themselves. For that reason, they've decided to rebel. After hearing this, Niro gets upset since he has been on the receiving edge of this greediness in the past. And understandably, the slaves are incredibly furious and want to retaliate. So, Gerard and the slave leader come to a compromise. They agree that would come to the castle to negotiate with the nobles, and if they attack, they will help them siege the castle. With that, they proceed to go towards the castle gates. On the way, they pass by the statue of the Lord, Aslan, who was supposedly a noble known for fighting for the rights of slaves. Well, that seems suspicious then. While walking toward the castle gate, a warning shot was fired in the direction of the bald professor. Gerard attempts to negotiate with the Lord by saying they were sent by the Emperor, but Lord Aslan refuses and asks them to leave. At that moment, the slave leader yells at Aslan and demands they open the gate and share their provision. However, the mage sends a fireball flying in his direction, which Niro was able to successfully block with his sword. As he was able to hit and destroy the castle, Neria stops him, telling him this would only make things worse. Yeah, tell them Neria. They'll be stopped swinging. Niro continues to slander the nobles and describes them as greedy pigs who only want to take everything from them. Lord Aslan then realizes that Niro was a slave, which Niro confirms, but rather than acting like your average entitled noble, Aslan responds by asking Niro if he truly believes every noble is corrupt, and argues that Niro only thinks that because of his bias. You make a good point. Niro turns to Neria and asks her to reinforce his belief, but alas, Neria's master was kind and nice, which further proves the point of Aslan. Yep, generalizing is bad. In the end, Niro is unable to agree with Aslan, so he proposes that they meet in the peace statue later. So, Aslan meets with the slave leader, who turns out to be a duke, as mentioned by Aslan. Before starting the meeting, Aslan explains to Niro that the truth is unsightly at times. True enough, when Aslan sits in the chair, it explodes in front of Niro. Right after the explosion, the slaves went right into attacking the nobles. Seeing this, Niro was in disbelief since he always thought slaves were the good guys. Well, there's bad in everyone, even slaves. Niro just stood there while everyone was retreating, so the bald professor had to get him back to reality. Despite the slaves' attacks, they were able to retreat successfully due to the mage's magic. However, Neria got hit by arrows after helping Niro get inside the gate. The mage immediately went to her aid and used healing magic, so she was able to avoid death, though her injuries are still fatal. Inside the castle, the mage points Niro toward the graves of men, women, and even children that the slaves have killed. Great, another character development for Niro. The mage then explains why the slaves are acting like that. When Aslan became the lord of the city, he made a policy granting slaves financial rights. With this, they were able to participate in the city's economy and essentially become merchants. Of course, commoners and nobles were opposed to this idea, but Lord Aslan went through with it anyway. Wow, he was such a nice guy. Too bad he's dead. That's because he was also once a slave due to his evil stepmother. He became a noble years later, so he truly cared for slaves. Because of this policy, a lot of slaves were able to be wealthy, some even richer than the nobles themselves. When this happened, the slaves acted similarly to nobles in that they treated those with less money than them like trash. They really pulled out the Uno reverse card. To remedy this, Lord Aslan increased the taxes on slaves, and this caused the slaves to become upset. Then Secneum's forces invaded. When the city was conscripting soldiers, the slaves declined with the excuse that they were not allowed to bear arms. Moreover, when the city distributed supplies, they distributed it equally among the nobles, commoners, and slaves. This upset the slaves who were wealthier than the nobles as they thought it was unfair they received the same amount of supplies as people who were poorer than them. And as such, they revolted. Whenever the city would receive supplies, they would intercept them. So, they just want to have their own kingdom. In short, they had become what they swore to destroy. Naturally, this upset Niro, so he went outside to fight against the rebel slaves. The slave leader was confused as to why Niro, who was a slave, isn't on their side. Oh, I don't know, maybe cause you are crazy. Niro tells the slave leader that they're just murderers who even killed children. The leader responds by saying that sacrifices must be made in the same way the emperor made sacrifices to get where he is. Niro argues that the emperor must have gotten to his position using just methods. With that, he proceeds to kill the slaves. Meanwhile, we find Neria talking about how Niro ends up being hurt whenever he sets out to hurt other people. True enough, while he's killing the army of slaves, he's becoming more guilty. As the battle continues, Niro uses large-scale magic, much to the surprise of the mage. The bald professor explains that this is the power of Shy Candidate. Then, a bird delivers a letter with news to the mage. The letter explains that Cephas is in that city, and if they wish to succeed in this battle, they need to find its main body. This definitely has Among Us vibes. On the battlefield, we find a child holding a knife looking for his father. It appears that he's the son of the slave leader. Seeing this, Niro became even guiltier after realizing that he may have killed someone's father. We then see Niro's shadow slowly getting murkier. Gerard hurriedly runs toward Niro to tell him of the news about Cephas' appearance. In the meantime, the kid searches for his dad. When he finds the pile of bodies, he realizes someone must have killed him, so he stabs Niro in the hand. Niro retaliates by holding his hand, and we see Niro's mind slowly getting corrupted with evil thoughts. As he was about to cast a spell and kill the kid, Gerard was able to stop it by pushing the kid away. The kid got yeeted. He then explains to Niro that this was a trap set by Cephas. True enough, shadows ascend from the corpses of the slaves. Gerard destroys the shadows and tells Niro to find the main body. He was then told that Cephas often implants the body within the brightest place, so Niro realizes it must be in the peace statue. It turns out there's a hidden hatch under the statue, so he goes down the hatch only to be met with Emperor Muren, or at the very least, a vision of Muren created by the monster. Muren's illusion questions Niro's desire to become like the valiant heroes he has heard in the stories. He also questions Niro's belief that becoming a hero will change the world. Muren continues to argue that despite Niro's father, Kundan's sacrifice, people didn't change. They're still corrupt, and essentially everyone is, as they move based on their desires. He even argues that even Kundan moved based on his desire, and he desired Lunadel. Basically, this Muren is a bitter AF. He continues to corrupt Niro by saying that everyone acts on their desires, his friends, other slaves, and even himself, as Muren convinces him into thinking that he started looking down on other slaves when he got in his position. Upon hearing this, Niro recalls the time his encounters with slaves that were greedy and corrupt, reinforcing Muren's points. Finally, Muren reminds Niro of the nobles that treated him and his family like pigs and convinces him that the desire of nobles was based on not wanting slaves to fulfill their desires. Slowly but surely, Muren was able to successfully corrupt Niro as Niro begins to give in to his chaotic side. We then see what's going on inside Niro's mind. His two sides, one that represents chaos and one that represents hope. As he's about to give in, he hears the voice of Niria and sees her hand reaching out to him. Her presence allowed him to finally snap out of it as he recalls the time she sacrificed for him. She was the manifestation of all that he hoped for. He recalls all the time he spent with her and his friends, and at the end of the day, he was able to overcome his chaotic side. She protect, she attack, but most importantly, she's got your back. At that moment, Niria tells Niro that he's different from her, in that he has thought himself to not yield or become dependent on someone else. But just once, it would be great if he can rely on someone else, even if it's not Niria. As they say, no man's an island. So, Niro stands up. He then recalls what her mother said when was sold, that Niro must never look weak in front of those that he wants to protect, because if he does, the smiles of others will falter. As he says this, the main body of Cephas materializes from tentacles. Is he the long-lost brother of Squidward or something? Though Cephas was unable to corrupt Niro, that doesn't matter as he can kill him anyway. What he didn't know, however, is that Niro got a huge power-up after having overcome his chaotic side, as he's able to use the entirety of his power without restraints. So basically, Niro joined the dark side, but was able to get back. So, they engage in a fight. Niro was able to slash Cephas, but he retaliates and knocks Niro away. Thankfully though, Niro has a mana shield, much to his surprise since he wasn't able to use this magic before. He understands that he's much stronger now than before as he's able to use spells that he was unable to use before. So, they go for a round 2, that's what she said. This time, Niro is able to overpower Cephas, and during their fight, he recalls the time when the Emperor Muren was training him. Muren explains that everyone has a power, and it's within their heart. Only by consuming the darkness inside them will they be able to awaken their true power. True enough, Niro is able to resonate with the power of Lugard. He then recalls Muren saying that Secneum's forces are weak to this power, so he tries to use it against Cephas. Cephas retaliates by attacking him with the power of Secneum, but Niro was able to absorb the power with his sword. Upon doing so, a scene of Kundan's seal appears in his head. Cephas asks Niro if he inherited Muren's sword, since the legendary sword, Arcdane, was the only one that can absorb everything. We then find Emperor Muren talking to his sword, indicating that this may have a connection to Niro. However, Niro states that his sword is his own. But Cephas explains that the power comes from the user and not the sword, so if he decides to end Niro, they're to stop that power from growing. However, Niro retaliates by teleporting behind and successfully kills him. Nothing personal, kid. Elsewhere, Neria is trying to pave a path to the outside by casting spells to destroy a rock, but she was unable to. She then cries due to her incompetence, but Niro helps her destroy the rock and reassures her right before kissing Neria. Finally, the ship is finally sailing. Upon killing Cephas, the slaves and even guards that were being controlled by him loses consciousness and dies. It turns out there were a lot of puppets under his control, and Niro realizes just how much destruction a demon lord can cause. While the slaves did some terrible things, at the end of the day, they were being controlled, and they didn't deserve to die. With this achievement, Gerard and the soldiers recognize Niro and Miria as proper heroes of the Empire. And though he's receiving the honor, Niro cannot seem to be happy about it. On their way back, Neria admires Niro for becoming as powerful as he is, but Niro tells her that he couldn't have done it without her. He also admires Neria for not having fallen to her chaotic side, unlike Niro. Neria is just so incredibly wholesome. Niro then expresses his concerns about his understanding of people, as he has realized that he doesn't know the world as well as he thought. They then arrive at the camp where the two other regiments are, who apparently have won their battles as well. They are greeted by Olmu, who congratulates them for defeating Cephas. Gerard explains that it was Niro and Neria who defeated him, which impresses everyone, especially Terasu and Even, as they realize that they must be as strong as Emperor Muren if they were able to defeat Cephas. I personally don't think so, maybe in character. Olmu asks Niro if he's able to find an answer to his question, to which Niro responds by saying he really didn't know much of anything. Olmu was probably hoping for that answer because he says that Niro has grown. Olmu then explains that there are two kinds of people in the world, those who are unaware of their ignorance and try to oppress those that go against their belief, and those that are aware of their ignorance and try to learn as much as they can. The former will always be a child, but the latter will be an adult, and Niro has demonstrated that he is an adult by recognizing that he doesn't know anything about the world. In the next scene, the students are eating dinner while celebrating their victories. Neria dozes off, so Niro attends to her by taking Neria to her room. Their fellow students, including Terasu and Even, see this and assume there's something going on between the two. Well, there is. Of course, Terasu is a bit jelly, but she accepts that Niro and Miria are together now. As she leaves, Even follows her and asks how she'll respond to his feelings for her, to which she responds by saying that he's made far too many bad decisions, so she cannot accept him. Yeah, you fucked up countless times, man. Meanwhile, Neria tells Niro to rest as well, but Niro tells her that he'll meet his birth mother in a few days. Finally, the long-awaited family reunion. We find the army running in direction. They are clearly exhausted, which is understandable since it turns out they've been traveling for 2 weeks non-stop. At that moment, they receive a response to the letter they sent the Emperor days ago, that they have been approved to stay at the Tower of Desire to rest. Some of the students, especially Niro, were unfamiliar with this place. So Olmu explains that it's where the palace that handles the Empire's internal affairs and where the taxes that have been collected go to. It's also essentially a preschool. I feel like taxes and preschool doesn't go together, but you do you. Upon arriving at the tower, they are met with a barrier surrounding the tower. The barrier is then deactivated, and they were greeted by the tower administrator, Kusin. Kusin briefs Olmu about the supplies, but before allowing them to enter, Kusin reminds Olmu that they must abide by the tower's rules. I bet those rules will be bullshit. Right after entering, a kid asks them to fill out a form that consists of a list of questions about their personal information. He then explains that their lodging will be decided based on their answers to these questions. In the next scene, we find out that the rules are that everyone is treated according to their social status. I fucking knew it. As expected, Niro and Neria were placed in the lowest ranks. They were then told by the kid to wear the badges given to them. Niro responds casually, but the kid calls him a muzral, which is probably a different term for slave, and lashes out saying Niro must respect him. Much to the student's surprise, Olmu encourages Niro to just follow the rules since they won't stay there for long anyway, so Niro just puts up with it. No wonder nobles are spoiled brats. They were thought by the adults to become entitled at a very young age. It turns out that Terasu and the other elf princess, Yans, were invited to attend this place before, but they declined since its rules were against their beliefs. Even, however, attended this place and even graduated here, hence why he was able to use magic before attending Excanum. After that, Kusin explains to the group that if they go against the rules, they will have to pay for it. He then asks Roina Even, Roina being the term for the highest class, to come with him as he has a special room. He asked the two elf princesses, Terasu and Yans, to do the same, but they decline as the two want to stay with the Musrals. Kuzan didn't pursue this matter further. Even, however, follows him. Before leaving, he instructs Niro and Miria to accommodate the two elf princesses while they stay on the same floor. The audacity from this man. Then, they find a huge bowl-like structure filled with liquids. It turns out the defensive barrier protecting the tower is generated from this structure. It's being operated with an enormous amount of ores that are refined manually through the kids' labor. Free child labor. Of course, Niro questions why kids would intentionally come to the Tower of Desire if it forces them to do this kind of work. However, Olmu explains that just like Excanum, graduating from this place is a privilege to most people, hence why people are eager to get in. During dinner, Niro attempts to converse with the Musral kids, but they don't respond. Wow, this conversation is deader than my class group chat. The kid who was facilitating them earlier comes and tells Niro to be quiet since they're not allowed to chat in public places in the first place. The kid then assigns someone to clean up the cafeteria, but Niro complains since he has yet to finish eating. After that, Niro and Niria observe the children playing at a distance. Then, in the middle of their chat, Olmu appears, and apparently, he has learned how the Tower of Desire operates. It turns out that the tower is basically an experimental center, and the Musrals, who are slave kids, are fated to execution, and they can only avoid execution by serving in this place. This is giving me Promised Neverland vibes. That's why they're happy to work. Olmu also explains that, unlike the Excanum Academy, the professors aren't the ones who give scores to the students. Instead, the students in the higher classes are the ones who decide the scores of those in the lower class. So high-class students can expel anyone they don't like? Got it. Elsewhere, Kuzan is talking to Evan and reminds him about the responsibilities of nobles. Kuzan also reminds Evan of his experience inside the tower, where he supposedly made a terrible decision. We then cut right back to Niro, Niria, and Olmu. Olmu further demonstrates the nature of this place by summoning a lot of coins. The kids see this and immediately inform the higher class kid, the Scoff. Upon seeing this, the Scoff instructs them to call the Roines as well. If I were there, I would have taken everything. Olmu explains that they act like this because they were conditioned to only take what they deserve according to their social status. So, since the Musrals or slaves only earned so little, they didn't take any of the coins as they didn't think they deserved it. Instead, they called the higher class students. That's essentially what this tower is all about, an experiment to observe the interactions of kids when they are conditioned to believe certain things. Niro didn't believe this experiment was approved by Muren since he was once a slave. But Olmu explains to Niro that when Muren became the emperor, slavery became stricter. And this tower is a project Muren himself is involved in. So is Muren actually a bad guy? We then see Evan struggling to stand up after remembering his supposedly traumatic experience. Kuzan helps him up and tells Evan he'll take him to the top of the tower. Olmu ends his explanation by saying that the concept of money and earnings is made by the empire to push people to work harder. Only by doing so can they keep the economy going. We then cut right back to Evan. Upon arriving at the top of the tower, they find a laboratory where a couple of bodies are stored in large capsules. It turns out that those are the bodies of kids that were expelled and were about to be executed. Okay, so it's somewhat similar to Promised Neverland. This surprised Evan. Kuzan then points him to a specific body, saying that it was the body of the kid who Evan personally expelled. Evan still remembers the kid's name, which indicates that they might have been close. Oh, backstory time. Meanwhile, Niro still can't believe that the Empire, much less the Emperor, is funding this project. But Olmu explains that Niro doesn't know Muren very well, and he shouldn't act as he does. He ends the conversation there as he tells them that there are other matters at hand. It turns out that the bodies in the capsules are part of an experiment to make a person unable to use magic. Yes, so they can oppress the slaves even more. They're closing the third eye, to be precise, since the third eye is essentially the only way for a person to see or feel magic. The experiment is working, but the speed at which the third eye closes is too slow. Kuzan then explains that they're already doing this by spraying potion through the sky. The worst part about this is that the third eye is also connected to the spirit, so by closing it, a person will also lose their spirit and become more irrational. So basically, like drugs. Kuzan explains that they're doing this so they can more easily control the lower class, since the higher class Roines are few in number and can easily be overwhelmed by the large numbers of slaves. At that moment, Evan sees the body of Max reaching his hand out to him. We then get a flashback of Max breaking a teacup in front of Evan. Evan keeps this a secret, not wanting Max to get punished. In the next scene, Evan gives Max a plate of smoked duck. Evan then explains to him that while he's being taught to kill people, he doesn't want to. I'm starting to like Evan again. He then tells Max that if he kills someone, it would not be him, but Roina. Then we see Max getting caught for trying to steal a supposedly important object, but Max states that he had no choice since he needs to buy medicine for his mother. At that moment, Evan was forced to make a decision regarding the punishment of Max, to which he says expulsion. Then we cut back to the present, where Max begs Evan to kill him. Evan swings his sword and breaks the glass capsule. We see Max cut in half. Damn, he got marked horizontally. Upon witnessing this, Kusin gets upset at Evan since the specimen, Max, was worth a lot for their experiment. Evan rebuts by saying that to the Shadow Lord, Secneum, they're not any different from a worthless worm anyway. That's an insult to worms. However, Kusin argues that they are sons of Lugard, not Secneum, and insists that what he's doing is noble. But Evan counters by saying that Lugard does not condone these wicked acts. He then prepares to cast magic onto Kusin, but only stops him as he enters through the doorway, along with Niro, Neria, and a couple of other people. Naturally, Niro and Neria is surprised at what they see inside the laboratory. Kusin visibly gets upset at their act of trespassing, stating that the experiments were authorized by Emperor Muren, and threatens them with this fact. Olmu responds by showing Kusin a bundle of papers, which frighten Kusin as he takes a look at his desk. Those are probably his collection of erotic mangas. Olmu explains that he was suspicious of Kusin from the beginning, as he didn't show signs of concern, despite the Empire currently being in a war. It was also strange that the tower had such weak barriers during the war, despite having a lot of budget. He was probably spending all of it on erotic mangas. With these suspicions to go off of, Olmu investigated Kusin, with the assumption that Kusin made a deal with the enemy. Olmu really is the MVP of this story. As expected, Kusin did make a deal with Secneum's force. It was to give them the results of his experiments and research in exchange of being left alone in the Tower of Desire. With that, they have reason to take Kusin into custody, and so Olmu commands Niro and Neria to arrest him. Kusin despairs since he was already close to completing his experiment of controlling the low-class people. Surprisingly enough, Evan finishes him off rather than getting him arrested, stating that he was a traitor. Finally, Evan did something productive. Evan then kneels and expressing his guilt and regrets to Max, which turns out is still alive. He then looks at him and extends his hand. Evan then burns him and ends his suffering. With that, Evan leaves, and as he does, he tells Teresu that while he's not sure if he can be a good person, he would at least not become worse. Will this be the turning point of Evan? After that incident, the administrator of the Tower of Desire changed, and the social experiment with the 12 classes as well as the Kusin's personal experiment was put to stop. This whole incident was covered up and remained a secret to the outside world. In the following scenes, we get a montage of our characters fighting Secneum's forces in the war, which changed their view of the world completely. We also get a scene of Teresu healing Evan, during which Evan makes a move but is turned down by Teresu. Oof, that must have hurt. Teresu explains that she wants to become shy. Niro nor Evan was her priority, but rather her family. So, before they recognize their feelings, they must first graduate from the Excanum Academy and save the world. Evan tells her he'll change for the better. With that, the montage continues as they struggle to fend off against the forces of Secneum. We then see Niro with one of his classmates, Rivero, leading out in his arms. Niro calls for help, but to no avail. As Rivero is about to die, he recognizes Niro and apologizes for treating him badly in the past. Side characters around the MC dies easier, I guess. After that, Niro regrets not being able to save him. The montage continues again, with a focus on Teresu and Evan this time. Then, by the end, they reach Noria, the Elven Kingdom. In the next scene, a gigantic monster is attacking what seems to a wall. Attack on Titan vibes. The monster successfully breaches the wall, allowing smaller monsters to infiltrate. Attack on Titan ship. Elsewhere, a soldier walks in on a room informing Queen Lunadel of the situation. Upon receiving the news, Queen Lunadel tells him that she will help with the defense, but she's clearly not doing well. As such, the soldier is against her decision, since she might come to harm, and that will affect the entire kingdom. Another soldier then barges in and informs them of the arrival of reinforcements, particularly in Excanum's special force. We then cut two Olmu attacking monsters, along with Niro, who kills the discount Titan, causing an explosion and ending the battle right there and then. Titan got one-shotted, Lol. Upon winning the battle, the elven and human soldiers celebrate. Queen Lunadel then arrives, prompting the soldiers to pay their respects and kneel down. As they were standing, Olmu asks why the queen was greeting them personally, as he has heard that Queen Lunadel was unwell, to which the queen simply answers was, because they're the kingdom's savior. After that, the queen welcomes them to Noria and informs them of the great banquet to be held the next day. In the next scene, we find Niria in her room. When someone knocks on her door, it was Niro, who was having a hard time controlling his emotions. Understandably so, since he's about to meet with her mother. Finally, it took them long enough. He worries that her mother won't recognize him, but Niria reassures Niro and calms him down. Elsewhere, we see elves singing in unison. The queen personally greets Tarasu as she is a candidate for the queen position. She also congratulates her for having the highest grade. Tarasu asks for Ruppy, which turns out is her pet when she was young, who has already grown to be a huge ass tiger. During their reunion, the Queen Lunadel asks if Tarasu has heard of a Ruin, one of the 3 elf princesses that was in another group. Tarasu comments that she hasn't heard of her, and turns out her family also hasn't heard of him. Come on, author, you're putting death flags on Tarek like you've just discovered the moon. In the next scene, the students and the queen are eating in one table. The queen commends them for their bravery of representing the humans. She then gives a motivational speech about loving their determination to reach their goals. In the middle of it, Avan asks if the queen also loves the evil side of humans. The queen responds by saying that they despise evil, but they understand that people are imperfect, and they admire that imperfection, as if to call back to Avan's determination to strive to become a better person. Then, Niro also asked a question, but this time, he asks the queen's thoughts about half-elves. The queen then inquires him of his origins, to which Niro answers he's a half-elf who was once a slave. Is this finally the mother and son reunion time? Queen Lunadel expresses her sympathy to half-elves. She explains that they didn't ask to be born, yet they had to face prejudice because of their nature, something they cannot control. They'd also have to deal with the struggles of controlling their 2 characteristics that clashes with each other. The queen tells them that she has always wanted to help half-elves, which is not just empty words, since it turns out she was the one who made the policy to stop the discrimination of half-elves. She's a real one for real. The queen then asks Niro which elf family he's from. When Tarasu was about to reveal that he's her son, Niro interjects and says that he's from a nameless family and his parents has passed away. Say psych right now. He's decided to keep his connection with the queen a secret, much to the shock of his friends. He explains that though he's been through a lot, but his experience has just made him stronger. Niria gets emotional and starts to cry. Shidi's a certified crybaby. After that exchange, the queen leaves. In the next scene, we find Niria, Avan, and Tarasu questioning Niro about his decision to keep his relationship with the queen a secret. They argue that Niro can live a good life and focus on his goal if he's seen by the public as a son of Lunadel. Amidst these arguments, Niro explains that he just wants to be Niro, a soldier of the Empire. Fair enough. He also tells them that the queen is ill, and he's afraid that telling her about his struggles will only burden the queen and deteriorate her health even further. Once the banquet was over, the heroes prepare to set off. The queen then sees them off, but before they leave, she grants them blessings. She starts with Olnu, boosting his magic power. Nice. Olnu can become an even better MVP from now on. Next, she grants blessings to the 2 elf princesses, Yans and Tarasu, enhancing their powers further. She then proceeds to Niro. While granting her blessing, she feels something in Niro. She then instructs him that when the time comes, Niro must find the jewel inside of him. Though she didn't mention who specifically, it's indicated that she was talking about Cumden sealed in the jewel. This also indicates that the queen might have realized he's her son. Well, I'll take that at least. She then continues to grant blessings to each student. As the students were leaving Noria with their horses, Niria admires Niro for holding his emotions despite the emotional reunion. In the next scene, we see a flashback showing the headmistress making a deal with a suspicious man, saying that you should open the gates and make it seem like they've been breached. Then, after that flashback, we see the Emperor Muren basically giving the go signal for that deal. Damn, Emperor Muren is more sus than a venting imposter. Elsewhere, Arun, one of the elf princesses, is fighting monsters while snowing. When she was about to get attacked by a monster, Tarek kills it with his sword. Long time no see. It turns out they are alone and surrounded by monsters. The 2 wonders why the monsters were able to get to that place, when there's supposed to be a magic defense barrier preventing them from entering. The freaking imposters, man. As they were conversing, the clawed monster attacks them and successfully knocks down Tarek. The monster then proceeds to attack Aruin, but she was able to dodge. She shoots him with arrows, but he blocks with his shield. She shoots again, but to no avail. The monster counterattacks by breathing fire. When Aruin was about to get scorched, Tarek blocks the fire attack. The monster continues to relentlessly attack them with fire, but Aruin finds a chance to shoot him with an arrow while shielded by Tarek. This time, it was successfully, but the body of the clawed monster knocks them over a cliff, causing them to fall to a body of water. Thankfully, the two of them survived, but since the water was too cold, the two snuggles, while Tarek is half naked. Tarek the Rizlord. Tarek was able to find a blanket somewhere in the area, and that's what they've been using to stay heated. This scene is hot, alright. They continue to snuggle, and while doing so, Aruin notices a burn scar in the arms of Tarek, which she assumes was from the earlier battle. He tells her that he can bear the pain, but Aruin states that she'll heal the burn with healing magic once she recovers her mana. She also notices the bracelet Tarek has, which apparently was what saved them by emitting a shield barrier in their previous battle. Niro is the MVP even when she's somewhere else. Aruin asks Tarek why he hasn't given up on Niro, when she likes Niro, but Tarek explains that he will only stop pursuing her once he no longer likes her. Damn, our sad boy. Aruin then admires Tarek's and the human in general inability to control themselves, a characteristic that's not familiar to elves. Aruin then sees that Tarek is sleepy, so she asks them to lay down so they can rest some more. Of course, Tarek was having second thoughts. He might be the type to peek on girls changing, but he's also a gentleman. However, Aruin didn't see any issue with it, and so they lay down together. The next morning, Tarek wakes up to see his injury is already healed. Aruin then throws him a rabbit that she hunted. Tarek was confused since elves supposedly do not eat meat, but Aruin has no choice since there are no edible leaves or vegetation in the area. Having saved her 3 times, she allows Tarek to make the decision for her if she must eat the rabbit meat, to which Tarek responds by saying they should eat it and survive together. All aboard, the Tarek Aruin ship is about to sail. After eating the rabbit, all that's left are its bones. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten, Mr. Rabbit. Tarek comments that it was not enough, to which Aruin responds by saying it's because Tarek eats a lot, while licking her lips. Tarek teases her for licking his lips and says that she must have liked the meat. Okay, no comment. The two continues their journey to find their troops. They decide to look for farms first. That way, they can ask for the direction to the kingdom, and they can continue from there. Tarek inquires Aruin if her legs are still hurt, to which she answers yes, and she's unable to heal it completely as she has yet to recover her mana from healing Tarek. Wow, she prioritized Tarek's wounds. She's a real one. As they continue to walk, they stumble upon a large chunk of snow. They decide to climb it, but Tarek instead grabs Aruin and throws her to the top, much to Aruin's surprise. Tarek follows shortly after by jumping up himself. Aruin admires Tarek's strength, and Tarek teases her saying she must have fallen for him, expecting her to deny it. She doesn't, so Tarek was curious since he thought elves like skinny guys with pretty faces, since most male elves look that way. Aruin just dismisses him saying that every elf has a different taste. Tarek is in, boys. In the middle of their journey, they again stumbled upon monsters, which seemed to appear endlessly. However, Tarek boasts that his energy is also endless and kills the monsters with 1 hit. He continues to boast, saying he can deal with them even if 100 appears, and as if to accept his challenge. Countless monsters appear from a distance. Dude jinxed himself, lol. Aruin scolds him and says that humans should learn to save words, as words can become seeds of disaster. They continue to kill the monsters, and during the battle, Aruin saves him 3 times by stopping the monsters from successfully attacking him. Leonidas is shaking right now. With that, they have successfully defended against the wave of monsters. They sit to rest, and Aruin proceeds to heal Tarek, during which Tarek tells Aruin that he envies the elves, especially their ability to live a long time and use healing magic. However, Aruin responds by saying that the caveat of such privileges is that elves are also bound to a lot of things. Tarek also asks her why she and Terasu always fights like cats and dogs. She explains that she actually respects Terasu, much to the surprise of Tarek. Aruin further explains that she has never won a fight against Terasu, and she knew from the beginning that Terasu was a much better leader and will be a better queen than her. Aruin simply acts that way towards Terasu so Terasu can learn to stand up for herself, and Terasu understands that as well. hence why they don't get in actual serious fights. Tarek teases her of basically becoming a witch for Teresu. Aruan then asks if she actually looked like a witch, but Tarek says she looked more like a slaughterer. Amidst their laughter, Tarek indirectly tells Aruan that she was pretty, and as their faces got closer, Tarek took that opportunity to kiss her. Tarek, the Riz god. The two finally finds their way to their group, who is currently fighting monsters. As they are about to join the battle, Aruan asks Tarek if he still likes Niria. He tells her that he no longer does, as Aruan has become more meaningful to him. Finally, no more love triangles. In the next scene, we find the other group traveling. Olmu asks Niro why he was walking instead of riding a horse. Niro answers by saying he felt bad for the walking soldiers. However, Olmu explains that while it's considerate of him to think of the soldiers, it's not necessarily the best thing to do. That's because other platoon leaders will be conscious and may judge him if he continues to walk. There will be leaders who will do the same, leaders who will just do whatever they want and continue riding their horses, and leaders who will bear hostility towards Niro. Even good deeds have consequences, I guess. In addition, it's only natural that leaders ride horses since they must prioritize their health as they have more important roles. So while the gesture is noble, Niro is unintentionally planting seeds of conflict. Niro, being the understanding person he is, takes what Olmu says to heart. Olmu tells him that that's just how politics work, and he needs to get used to it. Despite saying all those things, Olmu gets off his horse. He then tells Niro that he has to say something about Emperor Muren, and tells him to listen silently. Olmu explains that he's a spy from a rebellion, and he was sent to watch Muren and get revenge on the man who slaughtered his family. Olmu has the backstory of a main protagonist. We then cut back to Tarek and his group fighting monsters. Like Tarek and Aruan, the other students in their group wonders why Aruka's magic defense barrier, which should have easily prevented the monsters from infiltrating, was broken by the monsters, these traitors. Just as the students are running out of stamina, the headmistress appears and eradicates a bunch of monsters. Seeing this, the morale of the soldiers and Excanum students are heightened. Meanwhile, a mage appears and informs the headmistress that Secneum's forces had already reached the Eye of Lugard, sealing one of the pieces of Secneum, much to the shock of the headmistress, and the Oscar goes to. Upon hearing this, she informs everyone to head to the Eye of Lugard immediately, and so they do. However, upon arriving to the area, they realize that there were in fact no enemies. When a soldier questions the headmistress of this strange occurrence, she attacks him. Of course, the students and soldiers were dumbfounded by this betrayal. The headmistress continues to kill them off one by one. What a shame. She was a great Ara waifu. As one student was trying to escape, he was stopped by another master. Turns out not only the headmistress, but a couple of other masters are traitors, as they were killed one by one. The soldiers and students panic. A master also comes after Tarek, but he was able to kill him easily. Get wrecked. The battle ensues. Another master comes after Tarek. Aruan protects him as he was still in disbelief. Upon seeing this, the headmistress takes this opportunity to attack them, stating that she'll make use of his blood. Thankfully, another master protects them and tells the two to run. Aruan tells the master to protect others instead of them, but the master explains that they're the only ones left. As he tells them to escape, he was killed by the headmistress. You freaking psychopath. Seeing this enrages Tarek, who becomes a monster with a dark silhouette. The headmistress admires his appearance, which is apparently caused by a power unique to those with both human and high-ranking demon blood, also known as the Berserker. Surely they will survive, right? The headmistress continues to bombard them with magic. So Tarek attacks back, successfully breaking the headmistress' magic shield and injuring her in the process. She then counterattacks and sends Tarek flying. Tarek has got that MC power-up juice. With this injury, the headmistress decides to get a bit more serious in this fight. She casts a powerful spell towards Tarek, stating that while he's powerful, he is still underdeveloped. Aruan blocks the spell with her magic defense barrier. She was able to block it for a while, but it eventually breaks. Thankfully, Tarek comes to his senses in time and blocks the spell as well with the little bit of magic left in the bracelet that Niria gave him. Aruan sees this and tells Tarek that Niria must have cherished him a lot. Damn, Niria has that global support. Aruan then tells Tarek to hold on for 1 minute more as she has a plan. Since the shield is about to break, Tarek tells Aruan to run as he holds off the headmistress, who then increases the power of the spell. Finally, Aruan is able to cast the spell, which turns out is a portal, and it will apparently close as soon as one person passes. The ship hasn't even fully sailed yet, and it's sinking already. Aruan instructs Tarek to enter the portal, But of course, Tarek dismisses the idea as he doesn't want to leave Arun. However, Arun explains that the people who are above the headmistress are most likely also servants of Secneum. Elsewhere, we see Olmu with Niro. Olmu mentions to Niro about the time when he said that he has seen eyes like his before, one that is strong, but is consumed by darkness. Olmu explains that they were one of the families that were protecting the eyes of Lugard. However, 20 years ago, the day of the battle against Secneum, one of their past slaves, as well as the candidate for the Shai, Muren, came back and annihilated the family and destroyed the Eye of Lugard. So Emperor Muren is the imposter all along. Olmu was a little boy back then, but he witnessed the event. As such, he became part of the rebel and acted as a spy by becoming a professor. Hearing this, Niro was in disbelief. We then cut back to Arun and Tarek. Arun tells Tarek that his power is incomparable to Arun's, so it's better if he survives. So, once she finishes her countdown, she uses magic to push Tarek to the portal, leaving her behind. Why you gotta do Tarek dirty like that? Author? Olmu and Niro continues with their conversation. Niro asks what rebel forces Olmu is part of, so Olmu talks about the hero who was a longtime friend of Muren. That person realized that Muren was as big of a threat as Secneum. And so, he has a secret army ready in Laurentia, Tarek's home. It turns out that hero, the leader of the rebel forces, is Tarek's father, the Black Knight, Gagan. At least we still have someone powerful in the side of the good guys. Olmu tells Niro that his real name is Retnin, and he comes from the Asbaran family. Niro mentions that he might have heard of that name before, so Olmu explains that his family is quite influential, as they have led the secret organizations which protects the world. Basically, their family was the Eminence in Shadow. They're also an organization that prevents humans from falling into corruption. They're one of the few families that didn't like the hierarchical society where there are slaves, commoners, and nobles, and was therefore entrusted with protecting the Eye of Lugard. Hearing this, Niro was curious why, despite having so much power, the Asbaran family was unable to change the world. But Olmu explains that there's only so much one family can do. It's a shame corrupt nobles just outnumber the good ones. Olmu then tells the story of Muren, a half-elf slave who was loved and supported by the Asbaran family. However, since he was adopted when he was 12 years old, Muren had already gone through so much pain and suffering. That was enough time for his mind to be corrupted and for a monster to grow inside him. At least he was adopted by a noble family. Niro had it much worse. Seeing his potential, the Asbaran family sent Muren to study in the Excanum Academy. There, he was able to showcase his talent and showed everyone that he is a genius. Apart from his power, he was also charismatic, strong eyes, and soft looks. And in his perfection, everyone viewed him as the perfect candidate for the Shai. Their thoughts were confirmed when Soya, the sword that he was given, became Archdane. Niro was confused since he thought the Archdane, a legendary sword, and it was only later that they found out about it. However, Olmu explains that the Archdane is not a sword, but a title and ability, and only those that are nominees of Shai can permit the ability of Archdane through their own sword. Upon hearing this, Niro realizes that he's a nominee of Shai, as he looks at his sword. Even Niro's sword grows stronger faster than his classmates. Olmu continues his explanation by saying that Muren returned and annihilated the Asbaran family as soon as he destroyed Secneum and split it into 3 pieces, much to Niro's surprise. This indicates that Muren purposefully did this so the 3 pieces cannot be sealed properly. It also means that Muren was the reason why Kundan and Estramas had to die. After hearing this, Niro was angry. Rightfully so, since Muren, who he admired in the past, turns out to be the reason why his father died. Damn, talk about betrayal. Unfortunately, even Olmu and the rebel forces have yet to discover the intentions of Muren, why he caused Secneum to be sealed imperfectly, and why he is raising Avan and Niro, the descendants of Kundan, in his own ways. After that conversation, Niro rejoins the army. We then get a flashback to when Olmu told Niro that he won't be coming back to Excanum, since the rebel forces have started to move and plans to join the rebellion. Naturally, Niro was distressed since Olmu has been by his side, and has been guiding him since his early days in the academy. Olmu is the MVP, in more ways than one. However, Olmu just argues that Niro is the Shai, so he must figure things out by himself. Niro tells Olmu that he is just like a father to him. As Olmu is about to leave, he tells Niro to not let his darkness consume him, and instead let his heroic side take control. He also tells him that he's too old to be a father, so he'll settle for uncle instead. What a wholesome dad. We then return to the present. Niro tells Neria that while he has a monster inside him, He'll do his best to focus on the hero or guardian inside him instead. After that, they arrive at the academy. They were greeted by the headmistress, who tells them of the bad news that Group A has been wiped out, much to the surprise of everyone. She explains that they were wiped out by the army of Secneum, which invaded Aruka. It was by you, you little turd. Niro is devastated since she was close to him. With that, the fifth step has ended. Elsewhere, the army of Gaian from Laurentia marches towards Muren, along with Turek. Turek asks if such a large army is necessary, but Gaian explains that Muren is just that powerful. Muren is in front of the three seers of Noria, also known as big-breasted Uni Sans, who calls Muren the king of immoral. Muren asks them if the emperor will change, but the seers reply that they cannot see the future if it has already deviated from the original path. Upon hearing this, Emperor Muren gets upset and destroys them, just because they were tedious. I guess you really should never meet your heroes. Muren is just a massive a-hole. We cut back to a grave. The two elf princesses, Terasu and Yans, grieve the death of a ruin. Meanwhile, the headmistress tells them that the dead students are heroes. Hollywood's got nothing on this girl's acting skills. Niro also grieves the death of Tarek, as she cries beside Niro. After that, the students gather in front of the two professors. They express their concern about Aruka and assumes that it has been successfully invaded by the Secneum, seeing as how the group supposed to protect is wiped out. Some of the students are in disbelief since Aruka was supposedly protected by magicians. Wait, isn't that one of the students in Tarek's group? Why is he here? The author probably messed up. They fear that if the forces of Secneum continue their attack and heads to the Emperor, the Empire might collapse. Little did they know, the Emperor is the imposter. Hearing this, Niro shows his concern of Noria, which has apparently already lost their defenses as well and is having a hard time protecting themselves. However, they have a last resort, an ancient magic that will cut themselves off from the rest of the world, which they can use if the human empire, Valencia, were to fall. I use that magic all the time. Maybe I'm an elf. During this discussion, Gerard wonders where Olmu went. That night, the headmistress meets with Avan and tells him that this will be their last class. Avan asks if it's possible to save his father if he were to become as strong as the headmistress. The headmistress responds by saying that the only way to save Kundan is to use the same power that is sealing him, the power of Secneum. Little Avan is getting bamboozled real hard. She explains that using the power of Secneum is also the only way to stop the three pieces from combining with one another. Oh wow, how convenient must that be? She continues by saying that only those with noble mana blood like Avan can pull this off. And with that, Avan asks the headmistress to go on with the last lesson. Meanwhile, Niro is alongside Niro, who must have passed out after crying so much. Niro then goes to the bathhouse to relax, only to see Avan with a seemingly corrupted arm. Little bro failed No Nut November. Niro attempts to help him, but Avan instructs Niro to stay away from him as Avan dips into the water. Avan then tells Niro that unlike he who had everything when he was born, Niro lost everything when he was born. Elsewhere, we see Terasu and Yans at the edge of a cliff. Terasu thanks Yans for comforting her, and Yans responds by saying that the future queen shouldn't fall just because of that. They then get in a conversation about humans, their imperfections, their ability to grow like nature does, and how elves will continue to love humans for their imperfections. We then cut back to Niro and Avan. Avan explains that Niro will never experience the feeling of having everything, but still wanting more, to the point of giving everything up just to get what they want. He continues to say that Avan is destined to lose everything, while Niro is destined to get everything. However, Niro disagrees, saying that destiny is not predetermined. He also argues that destiny and justice is something they make for themselves, and they will not become complete before they do. Niro ends the conversation by saying that he wants to be a complete being with Avan. Not gonna lie, that sounds kinda gay. Dude forgot to say no homo. In the next scene, we find the headmistress talking to a crystal ball. She explains that there is only casualty in Avan's group. She hoped to get Niro killed by sending him to Cephas, but he ended up killing Cephas instead. Witness the power of the MC. The person speaking out of the crystal ball tells her that the more she tries to kill Niro, the stronger he becomes. Niro got that Zenkai boost power from the Saiyans. Wait, wrong anime. Since Tarek is still alive, the headmistress assumes that the army of Gaian will move towards Valencia. So, the person she's talking to, which turns out to be the Emperor, orders her to kill everyone in the academy, except for the two, Avan and Niro. Much to the headmistress' excitement, Niro knocks on a door, asking Neria to come out to eat lunch. Neria comes out, and Niro compliments her by saying she looks cute with swollen eyes. Behold, Niro the Rizlord. With all the deaths going around her, Neria expresses her concerns and wishes for Niro to stay with him until the end, so Niro reassures her. While the two are flirting, they hear a scream from a distance. Turns out the headmistress is already in the process of killing the students, stating that she doesn't need a plan like before, as she can kill them easily. Little did she know, she's not the MC. Upon seeing this, Niro recalls what Olmu told him about the headmistress, Kadia. Olmu explains that Kadia is actually a vampire, and unlike Muren, who is cautious, Kadia is unhinged. He then tells Niro about the origins of Kadia, a student of Excanum, which is part of the class that went after Muren's batch. She was shy and quiet, but over time, she developed a morbid curiosity of dead things. Wow, she's as crazy as Amber Heard. She was infatuated with death, that when she once found a dead dragon, she dug her way into its corpse and stayed there for an entire day. What the F? It was said that Kadia had as much mana as Kundan and Estrumis, but she didn't seek power. Rather, her curiosity was what mattered. So when she became curious about the Eye of Lugard, she applied for a job to guard it. Once she was in the area, she stared at the Eye of Lugard for days on end. Sounds like me, except I stare at a screen. That behavior continued for 2 years, until he killed everyone who was guarding the eye and drank their blood. She was then caught and imprisoned. While in prison, Muren talked to her alone, and after that, she became a model prisoner and eventually became the headmistress of the re-established Excanum Academy. Kadia is one of the reasons why Olmu applied to be a magic professor in the academy. Burn the witch. Upon hearing this, Niro deduces that Muren and Kagia must have conspired together. There were two imposters all along. The flashback ends with Olmu instructing Niro that if Kadia were to show signs of aggression, he must cut off her head immediately before she can unleash her full power. Niro instructs Neria to step back as he recognizes that Kadia is already an enemy. In the background, we see Tarasu and Yans walking towards them, still unaware of the situation. Niro shouts and tells them to step back as well, but Tarasu is not so fortunate and was hit by Kadia's attack, knocking her down. Hearing the commotion, Avan appears and sees a knocked out Tarasu. Nice. About time Avan stops getting finished by the headmistress. Kadia then prepares for a battle against the two shy nominees, and likewise, Avan powers up after realizing that Kadia must have hurt Tarasu. An enraged Avan shoots magic with the power of Secneum towards Kadia, but Kadia dodges easily, since Niro and Neria were on the opposite side. The magic went to them instead. They forgot to turn off friendly fire. Niro pushes Neria aside to save her from danger. He then absorbs the magic with his sword. Upon doing, he sees visions of Secneum, which startled Niro. He then remembers what Olmu told him about the Archdane absorbing mana and obtaining power that is similar to the absorbed mana. That explains why Niro was able to see visions of Secneum. Olmu also advises Niro to reject Secneum's power as it may corrupt him instead, which is what must have happened to Muren when he destroyed Secneum. Niro and Muren should have installed an antivirus on their swords. Amateurs. Needless to say, Niro decided not to absorb Secneum's power as much as possible. Back to the present, Niro counterattacks with the magic the Emperor taught him. Avan and Niro then gangs up on the headmistress and manages to knock her out of the building, making it easier to fight her without endangering the other students. They make a great team. Niro and Avan continues their barrage of attacks. Niro attacks first, and though Kadia was able to block it, Avan was able to stab her with his claws. Kadia escapes via teleportation and retaliates against the two. Avan was hit and knocked down, but Niro evaded danger, as Neria generated a magic shield to protect him. If only my supports are as good as Neria. Seeing this, Kadia tries to attack Neria, but thankfully, Yans was able to intercept the attack with her magical arrow. As they say, teamwork makes the dream work. It turns out the chaotic power of Kadia was weak against the nature power of the elves. Using this chance, Avan and Niro continues to attack Kadia until they were able to successfully cut off one of her arms. But Kadia simply powers up as a response and turns into a full-fledged monster. A now more powerful Kadia then instantly stabs Avan in the gut, and when Niro tries to stop her with magic, Kadia retaliates with an even more powerful spell, forcing Niro to absorb the attack with his Archdang sword. As expected, he sees a vision of Secneum again. This time, however, it went for longer, as Secneum was able to converse with Niro. Secneum tells Niro that humans were not sons of Lugard. Rather, they were born from the stomach of Secneum, originally as demons. hence why they are cruel and aggressive. Well, fair enough. With that, Kadia was able to knock down the two nominees for Shai, Niro, and Aven successfully. With those two out of the way, Kadia prepares to attack the remaining students, starting with Miria. As she was about to launch her attack, Turek, in his berserker form, appears and cuts off her arm. He should have went for the head. Anyway, beat the shit out of her for a ruin. Miria is surprised that Turek is alive, but Turek simply continues to attack Kadia in his berserker form. Since berserkers excel in close combat, Kadia pussies out and just attacks him from a distance. While he's stalling for time, he instructs Miria to get Niro. Meanwhile, Niro is still trapped in his own consciousness. There is no sound or smell. He cannot sense anything. Little bro got sent to the Shadow Realms. But then a sprout of light appears and greets Niro. It explains that it has already met Niria, but it's the first time it's meeting Niro. Niro deduces that he's talking to Lord Lugard. Niro gets confused since he should be seeing Secneum right now, but Lugard explains that just like how light exists within darkness, Lugard exists within Secneum. So, to understand true darkness, Niro must first understand true hope. Upon hearing these words, Niro wakes up to see Turek fighting Kadia. The gang is back. Boys, time for some ass beating. Niro asks about Avan's status, but turns out he's completely fine, as his wounds have completely recovered. So, they began their attack once again. Turek, Yans, Avan, and Niro continues their attack. Kadia is surprised that Avan has more power of Secneum than her. After having exhausted her power, Kadia gives up. As Turek is about to finish him off, Kadia gets a flashback of the time her parents died. Because of desperation, she dug the graves of her parents, only to pass out because of the shock. Then, when she wakes up, she sees a bunch of maggots crawling in her and her parents' face. Lol, I like how the servant just didn't bother waking her up. As she's saying her last wishes, Turek slashes her repeatedly, so Niro had to stop him, as Kadia is already dead. Turek took rest in pieces to a whole new level. After killing Kadia, Turek's bloodlust is still not satisfied, so he grabs Niro by the head. However, Niria stops him, and remembering how her bracelet saved him countless times, Turek cools down. In the next scene, we find Muren as he senses Kadia's death, which he assumes was because Kadia is arrogant. We then see him with a group of monsters walking towards the academy. The final boss is coming. Inside the academy, the students and professors gather, and they were all in disbelief when they were told that Olmu is a spy. Turek explains that the biggest problem now is Emperor Muren, who was the reason why Aruka's magic defense barrier was opened, and is the mastermind behind the actions of Kadia and his friends' deaths. Niro also adds that Muren was the one who destroyed the Eye of Lugard, and is the reason why Secneum wasn't sealed properly. In short, he's not the hero the history books told him to be, and he's likely instead on the side of Secneum's forces. Well, as they say, the history is written by the victors, not by the actual good guys. We cut to Avan going inside a room as he asks the students how Tarasu is doing, only to find her suffering from poison-like symptoms despite the efforts of Yans and Niria healing her. Avan recognizes the symptoms as the power of chaos, which he, too, possesses, and determines that regular healing magic cannot treat it. Avan tries to get closer, and as soon as he does, he gets a vision of Butterfly with a red glow. It asks Avan why he's choosing to become a good person rather than accept the chaos. It explains that love, friendship, and hope are just abstract things that humans made to control themselves, and in a way, protect themselves from their fear that they are, indeed, offspring of Secneum. Don't get bamboozled again, little Avan. As the chaos power starts to consume him, another butterfly appears, and this time, it's glowing brightly, and it tells Avan to choose for himself. Then, Avan comes back to reality, and turns out he was able to successfully suck the poison or power of chaos out of Tarasu. With that, Tarasu is now out of danger, until suddenly, a frog-like monster attacks the academy. Damn, when did Kermit the Frog get buffed? The elf professor was baffled by the monster's appearance, since the Excanum Academy should have been hidden by magic, but Niro deduces that the monsters must have been led by Muren. You hit the nail on the head, my boy. However, he still can't accept the fact that Muren was a traitor, considering how he helped him and Avan become stronger. They continue to fend themselves off against the monsters. Then, a dragon-like monster tries to attack Niro, only to be killed by arrows. It turns out to be Gaian's army, as he has arrived in the academy. Gaian then warns them that Muren has arrived. True enough, Muren appears in front of Avan. Avan prepares to defend Tarasu against Muren. but Muren just smiles. That smile is nasty as hell. We cut back to Niro's group, who's in a hurry to run towards Avon, but they find Muren and Avon walking side by side. Before Niro can say anything, Avon tells them to stop and not do anything. He plans to follow the Emperor. We then see a flashback of a moment ago where Muren threatened to kill everyone if he didn't surrender. Gaian appears and tells Muren not to involve the kids, and with that, the two heroes meet once again. The two gets in a little chat, right before facing off against each other. Everyone was in shock, including Tarek, who was in disbelief that Muren, or anyone, can block his father's sword. After that exchange, we see a flashback of Gaian and Muren in their younger days fighting against each other. Their classmates are in awe as the two have been fighting for a long time and hasn't stopped since. We then cut back to the present. Gaian tells Muren that he didn't see Muren as a slave, but rather a strong warrior. Like father, like son. Gaian was the one who took care of him from the beginning, so Gaian was devastated that Muren has changed so much. Muren then explains that he was more interested in Extremis and Kundin. Despite the strength of Gaian, who was stronger than Muren at the time, he didn't have anything else to offer. As such, Muren chose to get closer to Extremis and Kundin, who was able to teach him magic. And with that, Muren obtained the strength of Gaian and the magical affinity of Extremis and Kundin, making him the most powerful in the academy. You ungrateful little shit. The flashback ends, and the two continues to battle. Gaian gets in his berserker form, increasing his strength. However, despite the power-up, Muren still manages to knock him away with one hit, injuring Gaian in the process. Muren then mocks Gaian's power, but Gaian continues to attack him as he talks about how Extremis and Kundin thought of him as a brother. During their battle, Muren tells Gaian that it's ironic how Muren, who is a wicked person, uses the power of light when Gaian, who is the most pure of them all, is using the power of chaos. But Gaian responds by saying that his power is a curse that runs in the family. They continue to battle, and as Gaian is about to land a blow, Muren stops the sword with his bare hands, surprising everyone in the area. Muren then pierces Gaian's stomach with his magic, ending the battle. The author is really doing Tarek dirty. First, his ruin, now his father. With that, Muren leaves along with Avon. Niro convinces Avon to go back, but to no avail. Once Muren leaves, Tarek goes to his father. Then, in the next scene, we find Terasu waking up. Neria explains that she was hit by the headmistress and died to the power of chaos. Terasu then asks why she's still alive, considering how there was no cure to the power of chaos. But Neria continues by saying that Avon sucked the poison out of her and into his body. Avon got that sucking power. Terasu asks about Avon, but Neria tells her to get up first, as there's an important meeting. We then see Gaian lying in a bed. Thankfully, he's still alive, but it'll take a while before he can get up. Oh, thank goodness. The author decided not to screw with Tarek anymore. Gaian tells them that they, the new generation, are the only ones who can stop Muren. So they must do so, even if it'll cost them their lives. Tarek is hesitant as he doesn't believe he can lead the rebel forces, but Gaian tells him that he should act as Niro's right hand instead. Niro is the best candidate since, just like Muren, he faced adversities and struggles. But unlike Muren, who was swallowed up by the darkness, he did not. Niro tells him that he couldn't have done it without the help of his friends, but Gaian continues to tell Niro that his surroundings are irrelevant. It's a fact that Niro was able to fight the monster inside him and win. With that, Tarek tells Niro to become his leader, kneeling down to him, and the other students follow suit. Terasu also enters the room and begs Niro to lead them in bringing back the peace. So, after Niro recalls the time he spent with his adoptive father and how he has always wanted change, he agrees. With that, Niro became the rebel king. Nice. Shit's about to go down. In the next scene, we see a bloodied Avon. As the image zooms out, we find that the blood of Avon is being used to break the jewel that's sealing Kundin. Avon then calls out to his father as soon as he sees his face. Elsewhere, the rebel forces are in a hurry to go to the kingdom when they encounter the Black Dragon, who supposedly has enough power to destroy a city. Niro tells them that this is just an obstacle, so the offended dragons send an attack in his way, only to be blocked and absorbed by Niro's Archdane. Niro then uses the absorbed magic to kill the dragon, much to the surprise of his subordinates. Lol, Black Dragon, more like Black Lizard. We cut back to Avon, still calling out to his father. As he's doing so, a bunch of guards drags Avon's grandfather near the jewel, and Muren promptly stabs him, causing his blood to flow into the jewel, similar to Avon's. Turns out the blood of the father and the son is necessary to break the seal, and so the jewel was successfully unsealed. Kundan appears with an evil smile, indicating that he's still possessed by Secneum. Meanwhile, the human army is confused as to why monsters are protecting the castle of Laurentia with them. However, they shrug it off and reminds themselves of the Emperor's command to attack anyone who tries to attack the castle. Damn, the entire army is getting bamboozled by the Emperor. We then cut back to Muren, who is now kneeling down to a possessed Kundan. It turns out that Avan was to be the new body of Secneum, since the old body, Kundan, is no different from a rotting corpse. Avan was the perfect vessel, since he had the same blood as Kundan and had the power of chaos inside him from when he was young. Avan really likes getting bamboozled. When asked for a reward by Secneum, Muren requested for eternity. Secneum then talks to Avan, who is currently in despair as he thought he can save his father and reseal Secneum with his power. As Secneum is about to take over Avan's body, Kundan momentarily takes control and tells Avan to continue with his goal of becoming a good person. Elsewhere, the rebel forces continue to move towards the castle. Niro leads the army and kills a bunch of monsters with his magic. While this was happening, Secneum successfully takes over Avan's body, while Kundan's body disappeared. The Emperor asks Secneum if he likes the new body, to which he responds by saying the body was flexible, and he's able to use more power than expected. Meanwhile, Avan is trapped in his own consciousness. Inside, Avan is in an empty field, when suddenly, Terasu appears out of nowhere. Avan's memory is blurry, and he cannot recall what happened moments ago. He tries to, but the imaginary Terasu tells him to not worry about anything. Poor Avan is trapped in his dreams. As this is happening, Niro is still fighting the forces of Secneum that is protecting the castle gates for hours, with the support of Niria. As if the situation is not dire enough, an elf-like monster appears out of nowhere and attacks Niro, breaking Niria's shield in the process. They get in a fight, and Niro is clearly at a disadvantage, as he says that he's even more powerful than Kefis and Kadia. As Niro is about to get hit, he is teleported away by Olmu. I've said it many times and I'll say it again, Olmu is the MVP of this story. Along with him are a couple of magicians, which promptly attacks the elf-like monster. It turns out Olmu has brought the army of the secret organization that his family once led. Olmu then explains that the elf-like monster is Nuba, the king of ancient Noria. He's a half-elf like Niro, but he was arrogant and so he became evil. He's the real reason why elves hated half-elves. Olnu instructs Niro to ride a wyvern and go to Muren, while the organization holds off Nuba, and so he does. Nuba tries to stop him, but the wyvern was too fast to get hit by the magic spell. And with that, Olnu and the secret organization face off against the corrupted king, Nuga. In the next scene, we find Secneum asking Muren where the two remaining pieces are, as he plans to reabsorb them. Muren then leads Secneum to the remaining pieces which he had prepared. As they were walking, Muren asks Secneum why a god like Secneum cannot read the mind of someone who doesn't worship them. And right then and there, a new seal activates, sealing Secneum's new body. Damn, the Emperor is really bamboozling everyone. Huh. Muren then deduces that despite being regarded as gods, Secneum and Luger are also creations of something, as he was able to trick Secneum. We then find a puddle of blood connecting to the newly created seal, which turns out was activated by the son of Estremis, which disappeared after the ritual. Like father, like son, it is then revealed that he intends to use the remaining people with the blood of heroes to seal the other god in the world, Lugard, to make sure there are no gods left in the world. Meanwhile, Olnu and the corrupted king, they continued to fight. Olnu realizes that his magic is ineffective against his opponent, so he decides to use his last magic, which summons a massive spear from the sky and into the enemy. However, that too is ineffective, as Nuva is able to destroy the heavenly spear. Yup, you're definitely screwed. Nuva then retaliates by casting a magic spell that kills countless soldiers in the battlefield. The Secneum's forces then take this chance to counterattack against the army, causing Olnu to lose hope. While this was happening, Niro is able to get inside the castle. He notices that there are no guards around, so he keeps his guard up in case of an ambush. True enough, Muren tries to attack him, so Niro responds by swinging his sword towards Muren, believing that his sword, which is the Archdane, can take Muren's sword. Unfortunately, his sword is the one that ends up breaking, so Muren proceeds to stab him. Damn, power of friendship actually failed. Niro then wakes up to find himself in the same situation as Avan. He is bloodied, and his blood is flowing. Niro tells Muren that he was supposed to be their light, but Muren responds by saying that he was never the light. He was the darkness that had to endure the ugliness of humanity. Damn, that's too realistic. Muren ends their conversation there and explains that he will be summoning the real body of Lugard by sacrificing people with heroic blood. Blood for the blood god. Once he does, the body of Lord Lugard did appear and was promptly chained by a possessed Avan. Muren then slashes the body of Lord Lugard into 3 pieces. He then calls for the guards to bring the 2 eyes of Secneum, which seals the 2 pieces of Lugard. Muren explains that only when 1 piece of God remains can he control them, hence why he let 1 piece of Secneum possess Avan, and intends to make 1 piece of Lugard to possess Niro. Only by doing so can he make God his puppet. Dude has a god complex. In the next scene, we see a flashback of the time Muren destroyed Secneum. It is revealed that Muren was able to become enlightened and saw everything at that moment. Muren was also able to converse with the actual god of the universe, the architect. This gives my solo leveling vibes. The architect realizes that Muren wants a world without gods. Muren then confirms that and tells the architect that he hates the world for keeping balance between darkness and light. The architect explains that Secneum and Lugard are created from the minds of self-created beings like humans. The architect then asks Muren if he's the spokesperson of the people, and Muren, being the arrogant person he is, says he is the one with the strongest will. Seriously, this is next level shit. As a response, the architect gave Muren a scroll that tells him how he can control the gods Secneum and Lugard, and as such, he's acting on what he learned. Meanwhile, Niro is trapped in his consciousness, just like Avan. In his consciousness, Lord Lugard appears. Lugard explains that they, too, are just creations of humans, the real children of the architect. Humans existed before the gods. Lugard continues his explanation by saying that the ancient humans, or the self-created beings, created many things from the power of their minds. The existence of elves, too, were due to the desire of humans to be guided and reminded of their light. The ancient humans had great taste, not gonna lie. The existence of monsters as well were due to the will of the ancient humans, as they desired for balance between order and chaos. The existence of monsters then lead to the Genesis War, and the blood shed through this war caused the creation of Secneum, a god that will assist in imperfections, and Lugard, a god that will remind everyone of hope. And with a desire to let these gods stop the war, the self-created beings gave these gods all the power. However, Muren is not like ancient humans. He wants the gods gone. Muren wants the humans and elves to live the way they want, for the world to flow that way it should be, without the interference of gods. Surprisingly, Lugard agrees with Muren. Meanwhile, Secneum does not, as she believes that even after sealing her, the chaotic side and wickedness of humans will prevail and Secneum will be reborn and will eventually kill Muren. Dude's out here playing 3D chess. Lugard then instructs Niro to put an end to this once and for all by killing him, which should then kill Secneum as well, erasing the existence of God in their world. Lugard is a giga-chad. Secneum sees her exposed heart and realizes what's happening. Lugard asks Niro once again to kill him, to prove whether chaos will indeed prevail like Secneum said, or they will continue to move forward, as Lugard hopes. And so, Niro stabs Lugard's heart, killing both him and Secneum in the process. Once the deed is done, he is transported to where the architect resides. Niro asks the architect if they were created for good or evil. The architect tells him that they are in existence with 50 chaos and 51 order, and as such, they will always move at least one forward. Upon seeing Niro back from his consciousness, Muren wonders why he was able to break free from the seal, to which Niro answers was, because the gods are already dead. Damn, Niro quite literally killed 2 gods in one shot. In the next scene, we see Nuga, who's still fighting the rebel forces and the secret organization. He is able to overwhelm them with his strength. We then cut right back to Niro telling Muren that the gods are dead. However, Muren is in disbelief since the gods should not have been able to die because of humans, but Niro explains that Lugard chose death himself. Muren laughs as he has achieved his goal of killing the gods, and he plans to reign as the new god, since he is the most powerful among the remaining self-created beings. God complex activated. Muren then tries to attack Niro with magic, but nothing came out. Dude didn't get the memo. Turns out that with the death of Lugard and Secneum, mana no longer exists, since they were originally from the gods. We also see Nuga, who's about to finish off the army, suddenly run out of magic. The same happens to Olmu, which falls because he's no longer able to cast flight magic. An enraged Muren then slams Niro, and exclaims that he can recreate mana, since he's a child of the architect. Little bro is in denial. Upon realizes that he can no longer use mana, Nuga argues that he's still stronger than humans, since he has honed his strength for 10,000 years. Meanwhile, Muren continues to beat Niro and like Nuga, argues that he's still stronger than most humans, but Niro gets a chance to grab a shard of the Eye of Secneum and injures Muren in the neck. We cut back to Nuga and Olnu, who were about to face off against each other. Damn, Olmu is going for close combat despite originally being a magician. What a Chad. However, before they clashed together, Nuga was bombarded with arrows from the elves of Noria, led by Queen Lumidel. Another human army appears, which is led by Kara. Seeing this, the armies that were supposed to protect the castle decided to disobey the Emperor's commands and attack the monsters. Olmu realizes that Niro must have succeeded in killing the gods. As Muren's about to kill Niro with his sword, Avan stops him. Niro tells Muren that he's alone. He recognizes no one but himself, unlike him who had friends and people who will support him. Niro then extends his arm towards the shoulders of Muren, chanting the spell, Anacratia, and to Muren's surprise, Niro was able to cast the spell and kill Muren. The scene then takes us to 2 years later. We first see Tarek in an empty field, reminiscing about a ruin. Seriously, Tarek, my guy, we are here for you. Next, we're taken to Noria. Teresu is now the queen, and was informed by one of her subordinates that Luminil went on a trip. Next, we see Avan, who has become the emperor. He declares that slavery will be abolished. Who knew Avan would end up being a likable character in the end. We then see a flashback of Niro telling Avan that he cannot go into politics as a half-elf, so he gave the responsibility of leading the people to Avan. Of course, there are disagreements to Avan's decree. Meanwhile, Queen Lunadel and Olnu find their way to a village, which is revealed to be the place where Niro is staying along with Neria and his siblings. Niro, the second slave who found himself in darkness, but unlike the first, was able to find the light, the slave bee,